I caught my wife begging a friend for sex. My parents have now taken her side and allowed her to stay in my childhood home. So my wife of 7 years chose to relax last night. After dinner, she retired to the den and watched her programs, while I alternated between watching the Spurs football game and doing some other things I had planned. Next thing I know, she's opened the wine and consumed 2 bottles. Around midnight, I went to check on her and discovered she was asleep on the couch. I went to pick her up when her Iwatch vibrated and a message appeared on the screen. It said something like, "I can't do that." My name would make me feel 7 shades of awful. I was curious what the F that was all about, so I clicked on it, and it was a chat between my wife and a buddy of mine. Now, I wouldn't call this man a close buddy, but he's someone with whom I've played 5 sides for years, drank, and known since we were teenagers. We used to call him Jacket Holder because whenever we got into fights in his teens, he was usually the one holding the jackets while everyone else went for it. Right. So, as I already stated, I continued the chat while this gadget remained linked to her wrist and scrolled up to the top. And as far as I can tell, he is the one that contacts her first. Unless she's removed, there's a lot of flirting and wink-wink going on, but nothing as outright cheating as what I experienced last night. And when she's inebriated, she begins publicly begging him for sex. I could not believe my eyes. I'm paraphrasing because I can't recall the exact words, but she was talking about how much she had always desired him, how no one would ever know whether he wanted to accomplish something. The last one that effing killed me was that she was excellent at keeping secrets. I tried scrolling through her watch but couldn't discover any more messages, and I don't know her phone's passcode. I put her in her bed and waited in the kitchen in amazement until I fell asleep, then got ready for work at 5:30. When I started to get into my work van, I slumped down on the wheel and realized I couldn't do it, so I went back inside the house, took a half-drunk bottle of vodka, filled it up with Coke, and went for a walk down the railway line. We lived near a lot of woodland and an abandoned railway line that stretches for miles, and I've walked about half of it. I'm sitting under a railway bridge right now, enraged by the whole situation. You'd think there was a fire blazing from a mile away based on the steam coming out of my ears. So what should I do? I don't want to speak with her. I can't bear to look at her after reading that nonsense. It felt like a dagger through my heart. I feel like every ounce of affection I had for her has vanished into thin air. After reading her pleading like that, effing yuck. I really want to go see her, man. If I could, I would never talk with her again. The fact that I'm so good at concealing secrets was what drew me in. Like, who exactly are you? It smells. But it's a question of how far down the rabbit hole I want to go. I don't care if I'm honest. I'm just finished. I've never felt so cheated and disgusted in my entire life. The truth is, I've made a significant investment in her. Not just as a partner, but as an individual. I adored her and believed that her personality, and thus mine, mirrored the qualities of decent people. Realizing she's a backstabbing snake makes me feel like one. I feel like a worse person than I did yesterday. The only way I can describe it is for someone you looked up to, who gave you advice and life lessons, to suddenly reveal themselves to be a pedo, a rapist, or simply a weirdo. Your entire view of yourself and who you are would be shattered because you believed what they said and spent time with a creep. God, I'm rambling. I apologize for this nonsense. My parents own our house, which we moved into 6 years ago after they relocated to a retirement town. When they die, the house will be handed to me, but I do not own it and hope not to for a long time. They couldn't be bothered with the upkeep and all the troubles and wanted to spend their final days in peace. So when we split, my soon-to-be ex will not have access to it. So what do? I'm honestly considering not saying anything and throwing her out. Also, while going here, I considered asking my maid, who is a locksmith, to quietly change the locks today. I could tell her anything about the smashed doors. She won't care what's going on as long as I'm present. After he's finished, lock the front door and tell her to come out and look at something in the back. When she comes out, I'll just rush back in and lock the door. Doesn't that seem childish as F? In all seriousness, I'm not sure what I'll do. I'm looking at a bottle right now, and it feels like my life has been ripped apart at the seams. As for my so-called friend, there is little doubt he was up to something. There's also little doubt that I would have missed this entirely, so I will see him very soon. Never mind carrying jackets, he will be holding his face. Update 1. 2 dog walkers came over to check on me since I was worried about them. I told them everything. They listened, and the first thing one of them told me was, "Son, drinking is the worst thing you can do right now. I'll cause havoc." I have to thank her for that because I was on the way to hell at the time. I threw away the vodka. I contacted a buddy who offered me a place to stay for a time to calm down. He was at work but informed me where the spare key was. We reside in a little town of about 15,000 people, so he wasn't far away. So when I arrived there, I sat on his couch attempting to relax. Throughout the morning, I received numerous texts and phone calls from my wife, asking where I was and what was going on. My work van was still waiting in the driveway, and I was nowhere to be seen. I wrote her back, explaining that there was an engine problem, so I got a lift into work, which she seems to accept as she simply responded back, "Okay." When my friend returned from work at around 5 o'clock, I told him what had happened and asked for his opinion. I also instructed him not to tell anyone about the jacket holder because it might come back to my wife, which I didn't want at this point. I'd deal with him later. That means I'll reveal what a little rat he is. Knocking the heck out of him does not help me at all, as of today. In response to others who said he had done nothing wrong, he messaged my wife first. He was being really flirtatious. What the AF is even playing it? Messaging my wife in the first place. He merely knows her in passing from a distance. Look, I have no problem with 2 adults speaking, but they didn't know each other and it was flirtatious from the start. As far as I can tell, I believe they saw each other while out and about and it became flirtatious from there. So my friend urged me to keep a low profile and see what I might find. However, you should consult with a lawyer and start the process. I found out about my options today. He got me home around 6 o'clock and I was completely exhausted. I believe that having your adrenaline racing throughout the day and then abruptly stopping knocks it right out of you. So I was exhausted when I got home. I sensed something was up the moment I went through the door. My wife was on me immediately away, asking me all sorts of work-related things, so I asked her why she even cared. She stated that I had left my large flask and lunch bag in the front passenger seat of my van, and that something had happened today. She could feel it. I was going to lie, but I was simply too exhausted. I couldn't be bothered putting on any sort of charade, so I just said, "Yeah, there is something up," that when I was putting her drunk ass to bed last night, a message came up on her Iwatch, which I read and all the others, and that she was an effing disgusting cheat that I wanted nothing to do with anymore. Within about a second, her manner shifted from one of strength with arms crossed to one of fear. Excellent at keeping secrets. I'm begging that little rat for sex. Yes, read it all. She began sobbing and I moved away and upstairs to the shower. When I came out, she was crying on the top stair. Still, the excuses began straight away. She was inebriated, fragile, and had never done anything like this before. How he messaged her first, and it meant nothing. She was not going to go through with it. She would say pretty much what everyone else on here was saying, as if she knew what was going on. The only thing she didn't do was attempt to blame me. She probably knew I would have tossed her out the door if she had done that nonsense. I informed her that I wanted a divorce and to be out of the house within a month. I also informed her that she was relocating to the extra room. Since then, I've pretty much ignored her. When she begins to ramble, I simply scowl at her and shake my head. Nonsense. I do not want to hear that. She stayed in the spare room last night, and I haven't spoken or texted with her yet today. If I'm lucky, she'll be gone when I return from work. But my luck isn't too good, I think. When I got her out, I told my parents what was going on, and my mother insisted that I not abandon her on the streets. She and my mother have always been close. In December, we will celebrate 11 years of being together. My mother said she made a mistake and that we should handle it like grown-ups. We've been through too much together, and she hasn't done anything. It was only words. She absolutely chose her side over mine. I couldn't believe it had abandoned me here. Do I have no right to ask her to leave if my mother objects? When my parents die, I will inherit the house. And I didn't do anything wrong, so I am not leaving. It's probably going to be like War of the Roses Part 2. I managed to schedule an appointment with a divorce lawyer for next week, so I'll be there to discuss my alternatives. Until then, I suppose I'll just ignore my soon-to-be ex-wife. I know she's probably not going to say anything else now. I'll never know if she was a good liar or if she was just telling him lies to persuade him to agree to an affair. Update 2. It's been 20 days since I discovered my wife was attempting to cheat on me with a friend, and the situation has gotten horrible. I gave her a month to get out, and she has been sleeping in the spare room. But now that she has my mother's ear, it's evident she has no intention of leaving. She doesn't have someplace to go, and that's not my concern. I have seen my divorce lawyer several times and am currently in the process of drafting a divorce petition and having my wife serve divorce papers. I've also opened my own bank account and deducted 50% of the balance from our combined account. The vibe around the house has been strange to say the least. The living room has become a no man's land where no one goes because we both spend the majority of our time in our rooms. I've also been purposefully working late so that I don't have to contact with her as much. I had been absolutely ignoring her, but after reading about the 180, I began acting civilly, although a little coldly, toward her. I'm pleased I did this because I was starting to feel like a monster for refusing to acknowledge her existence. It was not the correct thing to do, and I ended up feeling like I had wronged her rather than the other way around. The only time I deviated from the 180 was when I stepped into the bathroom last week and saw her crying on the floor by the bathtub. I helped her up and automatically hugged her, though it was more of a there hug than one full of love. The terrible part is that I'm so suspicious of her now that I wouldn't be surprised if she was waiting for me to come in so she could put on a show. The thing is, it probably isn't true, but this is what's going through my thoughts in this situation. It's simply toxic. She's been boasting about how she'll do anything to save this marriage, anything to demonstrate to me that it was merely a dumb error. So I mentioned a lie detector test. I have no intention of ever finishing one. I wouldn't know where to start. I simply wanted to measure her reaction. She was all for it. Well, until a few hours later when she returned to me with a tablet in hand, complaining about how inaccurate they are and how worry and nervousness can cause erroneous readings, as well as her anxiety illness in general. I just chuckled. It wasn't even a regular chuckle. It began as a cackle and finished with a childish chuckle. She seemed to be willing to do anything to save this marriage, with the exception of taking a lie detector exam. It doesn't really matter. I meant what I said in the first post. After reading her say such dreadful words, every ounce of affection I had for her vanished into thin air. I don't consider her my actual love anymore. I could tell him anything and would trust him with my life. I simply see rubbish. Trash that needs to be removed before it stinks. The place-up jacket holder has been the talk of the town since I introduced him to our friend group a few weeks ago. It is safe to conclude that he has no friends left among us and has been entirely isolated. I tried calling him several times, but he refused to respond and eventually blocked my number. If that small rat. I hope it was worthwhile. I've discussed this with my mother several times, and after one intense dispute, I asked her why she was siding with my wife. Was there something she wasn't telling me here? How did she expect us to live? Roommates carry on as if nothing happened. This is ridiculous. She stated that she has always considered my wife as the daughter she never had but always desired. My mother had a stillborn daughter before my birth, and it's tormented her. So she became attached to my wife and has remained so ever since we met. As I already stated, they share a deep bond. My wife has no relatives and only a few friends with their own busy lives and families, so if I threw her out, she would be completely alone. And my mother feels that's unacceptable, especially during a pandemic. She tried to persuade me to reach a compromise, stating that we should revisit it in 3 or 4 months to evaluate where we are mentally, and she is encouraging me to try couples counseling before giving up. I am not doing that. I feel ill just thinking about spending Christmas in the same house as my wife. She'll want to do it correctly, just like she does every year, and it'll be a total disaster. My father, God love him, has never been a talker, never up or down, just always there. He's a calm, proud, yet timid man. My mother's word has always been the most important in our household. People on here have been calling me selfish and spoiled because it isn't my house and I have no right to make demands, but now it's either my wife or myself for my folks. If the worst happens, I am prepared to walk out the door and never return. F this place, I have to be able to look myself in the mirror with some dignity, and someone has to honor their promise in this mess. If I do go, my friend has offered to let me stay with him for a few weeks until I can figure myself out. If I walk out that door, I'll be done with my folks. I will never talk with them again in my life. They'll undoubtedly interpret it as my giving up on them. I walked away without first attempting to rectify things. I perceive it as them preferring someone who has broken my heart above me. Like, what will the logistics be once I'm gone? My mother and father are looking after a backstabber while their flesh and blood flees on their own. A little additional information about the house. My parents allowed us to move in a year after our wedding. It appeared to be a belated wedding gift, although this was simply their talk at the time. They were always intending to move out and us in. I've spent tens of thousands on it over the years, but that's beside the point. I have fantasies about leaving it all behind, going somewhere new and starting over. But I have nowhere else to go. I've lived in this town my entire life. This is all I know. Am I being overly severe here? I am practically ready to slingshot my parents out of my life, but I am so torn. Why do I have to lose everything and everyone? I've tried to be good, and I always thought you made your own luck. Decent things happen to decent people. Perhaps I'm not as good as I believe I am. Maybe I deserve everything I have and receive. Update 3. Well, as of this morning, I no longer call that house home. I saw on the calendar that my wife had a hospital appointment with her ophthalmologist, so knowing she would be gone for a few hours, I took advantage of the chance to gather my belongings and move out, which I did after getting my things transferred and organized. I dropped the house keys on the kitchen table, along with the divorce paperwork I received from the lawyer last week, and headed out. I've blocked both my wife's and mother's phone numbers, and all future communication with my wife will be handled through my lawyer. In terms of housing arrangements, I'm staying with a friend for a week or two, but I aim to be in my own rented home by Christmas. I haven't communicated with my folks in several weeks. The last time we spoke was by text, and I tried to explain to my mother in detail what my wife was saying to the jacket holder, why it hurt me so much, and why I didn't think it was her first time doing it. I'm excellent at keeping secrets, and thus I could never trust her again. My mother texted back stating she couldn't talk to me when I was like this and that she would let me cool down. She tried to call me a few days ago and I blanked her call. Since today, I have blocked her phone number. I feel so let down by my parents, and it nearly feels worse than my wife's original betrayal. I doubt I'll ever speak to them again given how I'm feeling right now. I believe that during times of struggle, you go to your family for strength, for you to be a rock and give you the wrong answer. Support. My parents have been feeble. They have made me feel like I am in the wrong. I feel like I'm overreacting and I'm the one tearing this family apart. It's not. I never asked them to move a mountain for me. Simply transfer my unfaithful wife out of the house and they'll make their decision. My father, for the first time in his life, had the opportunity to set a boundary, stand up for me. But haven't you made your choices? I suppose you live with him. People have said that I gave up too easily. I was seeking for an escape and didn't love my wife since I didn't work hard enough to save things. But this is not true. I loved my wife more than anybody else in the planet, and I was devastated when I found what she was doing. I believe we all have boundaries, and once those borders have been breached, everything changes irreversibly. Something inside me changed when I read those horrific texts. I fell out of love with her. It's like being jolted out of a trance in the movies. Anything done after that is only postponing the inevitable. I have to say that I'm intrigued by the whole chemistry of their connection, now that I am gone. Like, will my parents continue to support her despite the fact that their relationship with their son has ended? Personally, I would love to travel. My wife disliked flying, so most of our vacations had been to southern England, such as Newquay and Torquay, Cornwall, and Devon, so it would be wonderful to travel overseas again. Update 4. It's been over 7 months since my initial post on Reddit, and I honestly thought that was it for me. I didn't need any more advice. I had made my decisions and done what I said I would do, but I received a phone call this morning that drew me back into the mire. I moved 15 miles away, changed my phone number, and am still in the process of divorcing my wife. She has entirely ignored all of my divorce lawyer's requests for cooperation, which has hampered proceedings. We are currently in the process of filing an application for considered service and attempting to have her served properly by the courts. If she continues to ignore, I will be able to proceed with the divorce without her input. So, while at work this morning, I received a phone call from a buddy who informed me that my father was attempting to contact me since my mother was ill, and that it would be acceptable if he gave him my phone number. I responded sure, then my father called to inform me my mother was in the hospital. She's stable, but not amazing. Obviously, I was astonished because I hadn't heard my father's voice in a long time. It was also the most emotional I'd ever heard him. He told me that my mother urgently wants to see me, so would I meet him at the hospital tonight and accompany him to visit her? I replied all right and planned to meet him outside the hospital. I went home from work because I couldn't concentrate, and now I'm climbing the walls, wondering if I made the right decision. I'm wondering if I'm about to get dragged back into this crap show from which I walked away. I've never been more nervous in my life, and my lack of control over the situation has sent my mind racing in all directions. I feel like I'm heading into a burning building, blindfolded with no idea where the exits are. Why does she want to speak with me now? Has she experienced a change of heart? Unless she also underwent a personality transplant. While in there, I find that implausible. Will my wife be there? I'm not interested in ever seeing her again. I'm still unhappy about what happened with them and how they chose my unfaithful wife's side over mine. I've been debating whether or not to go, but I will. I was also considering asking if she wanted to chat on the phone instead, but I'm not sure whether she would or if she's healthy enough. I feel like the bad guy here, as if my decision to walk away contributed to this. How would you handle this? Update 5. I've spent the previous several days trying to process what occurred and how I'm feeling, so I ended up going to the hospital on Wednesday night after much back and forth. I was tempted to pull out at the last minute since my bottle was collapsing, but I needed closure and knew I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't attend and something happened. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, I had a genuine sense of paranoia and half expected my wife to appear from behind a bush or something. I met my father at the entryway, and it was unpleasant since he tried to hug me and I declined. I then said, "If my wife is here in any way, shape, or form, I'm about to turn and leave." He assured me she wasn't, and we proceeded to the ward where Mum was. When I saw my mother, I had the scare of my life because she looked like she had been in the wars. I have never seen her look so frail. She has an awful black eye. There is also a lot of bruising and purple yellowness on one side of her face. She suffered a catastrophic fall, breaking 2 ribs, shattering her elbow, and banging one side of her head into the ground. So elbow and ribs. Then, as she walked down, she did so in that order. She appeared zombified but perked up when she spotted me. She told me how much she missed me and that she didn't think she'd ever see me again. I informed her that if she really wanted to contact me, she may do so. We talked for a while about what had happened and how she had been down for several hours before my father discovered her. Also, she was determined to return to normalcy and restore her relationship with me. I mentioned my wife and how I'd been pressing for a divorce, but she was either ignoring or not receiving the letters, so I inquired whether she was still in the house. Mum admitted she was, and Dad began to look uneasy. I just looked away, disgusted. Mom began to express how lost my wife is without me and how she is not doing well. I knew then that nothing would change. She hasn't had an epiphany or seen things from a different perspective. She simply wants the status quo restored. She stated that the house is my home and always will be. But I told her I did not want it. It no longer means anything to me and only brings back horrible memories. Overall, I stayed for less than an hour. When I left, I indicated that if I wanted to contact you, I would. But don't wait on the phone for me to call. You might be waiting a while. When Dad escorted me out, he asked if I'd keep in touch with him, and I answered yes. I'm not sure whether that's right or wrong. Time will tell. When I arrived home, my emotions were all over the place, ranging from despair to wrath. But I am pleased I went. I couldn't help but think of my wife and how much she used to mean to me. It will never stop hurting when I think of everything that has happened in the last 7 months. It just doesn't feel real. The speed with which everything went apart was just fascinating. I understand how quickly life may pass you by, especially if you're unprepared. And I was not paying attention. It was just pure luck. I found out she was trying to cheat on me. Cosmic coincidence? There's nothing more. I never noticed the signs or put things together. I just saw something on her watch that ripped my effing life apart. I now realize that it was not the only time. I know this in my heart. I see who she is and have no affection for her, only contempt. I believe she robbed the best years of my life. When I think back on the good times, they've soured. It feels like another person's life, not mine. My friend suggested I contact a therapist or anything to attempt to let everything out, or else this will fundamentally impact who I am and how I create connections in the future. That's something I plan to do. I believe so, as I feel somewhat broken on the inside. The previous 7 months have been the hardest of my life, but I'd rather know what's going on than not. I'm simply upset that everything happened the way it did. But you can't pick how someone invites you over. I suppose you'll have to learn from it. I recall reading that loyalty was the most underestimated character attribute, and I realize why today. It's probably because you never know if someone is actually loyal to you until they aren't. It's not something you encounter every day. But now, more than ever, I see how crucial this trait is. Update 6. My wife and I are nearing the end of our divorce proceedings. She has signed the divorce papers and forwarded them to my divorce lawyer. So all that remains are formalities. She wrote me a message through my father in which she apologized for not allowing me to go on, saying she thought she could save things, but now realizes she can't and must move on for her own well-being. I appreciate her for seeing things clearly. She doesn't want anything in the divorce and has stated that she would leave the house once she is able to support herself, which I am fine with in terms of my mother. I haven't spoken with her yet, but according to my father, she's doing much better now that she's out of the hospital and back to normal. I'm not sure how things will work out with him, but I've told them that if the house is going to be mine, they should put it in my name right away to give me some security. Then we can try to build bridges. We'll see how it goes. My hardest battles ahead are in my thoughts, attempting to overcome everything that has occurred. The brain is a marvelous and terrible thing. To give you an example, I can still taste the truffles. I scoffed and threw up at my grandmother's place when I was about 5. I've never had truffles again, yet when I remember about 30 years, I can still taste them. What I'm saying is that I don't want to hold on to thoughts, feelings, and opinions about everything that happened 30 years ago. I don't want to be one of those elderly folks who claim that life's hardship has taken everything wonderful from them. You often hear about people who were once decent, kind, or amusing, but then had experiences that forever transformed them, turning them into someone they never intended to be. And all that remains is anguish. I do not want to be that person. I need to let go of this anguish before it swallows me. I started treatment and spoke with a psychiatrist both over the phone and in person, and it has helped me a lot to talk openly about everything, even if only for a short time. When I was complaining about how my greatest years were behind me, my psychiatrist said something to me that really hit home. Your best years are the ones you have left. I believe she meant that the past is gone. It does not exist save in your head, but the here and now does. And you have the option of making the most of it or living in a past that no one else knows about. It's a phrase I'll try to remember whenever I'm feeling low. I said in one of my previous writings that I wanted to travel, and it is now happening. My friend has agreed to accompany me, and we've booked a 1-week journey to New York in early October. I am really looking forward to that. I've always wanted to see New York when the leaves change. Reminds me of the film You've Got Mail. I hope that this is only the beginning of my trip adventures. I want my letter 30s to be filled with recollections of adventures I've experienced overseas. That's the plan, anyway. All I know is that for the first time in what feels like a long time, I'm waking up with hope in my heart and walking with a spring in my step. If that isn't progress, I'm not sure what is. Update 7. Well, it's been a year since my first Reddit post, so I thought it would be appropriate to provide one final update and conclude here. First things first, I am now officially divorced. It seems like a weight has been lifted, but it also marks the end of roughly 1/3 of my life. I saw my ex-wife for the first time since last December as I walked into a shop in the town center around a month ago after visiting a friend. She opened the door to leave just as I walked in. We were both wearing masks, but I recognized her right away and established eye contact. She muttered something I couldn't understand. Then we stared at each other for a few seconds. Then I went inside. As I walked throughout the shop, a sense of profound despair overtook me, and I had to take a moment to collect myself. It simply goes to show. All it takes is one look to bring you right back to square one. Do I miss her? No, I miss who I thought she was. But that person does not exist anymore, if she ever does. I don't desire for pain or difficulty, albeit I honestly don't. I simply refuse to move forward with hatred in my heart. The only person it will affect in the long run is me. I also learned via a friend's girlfriend that she was certain she spotted my ex-wife outside a city pub, all over another guy, a few years ago. Apparently, she never said anything to me or my friend since she wasn't sure it was her and didn't want to become involved. I'm very upset with her since I could have used that information years ago. It's far from definite, but I could have confirmed if she was out that night, etc., and saved myself a lot of misery in the long run. Now I see why I never liked her. One of the reasons we wanted to book a flight to New York in October was because the travel ban between the United States and the United Kingdom was scheduled to ease in September for fully vaccinated visitors. Unfortunately, that has now been pushed back to November 8th, putting our preparations on hold. My friend cannot get time off work till the new year, so if I go, I'll have to go alone, which is unfortunate given that we were both looking forward to going together. I'm quite set on going with him in the new year, though I'll have to think about it more carefully. This pandemic has continually thrown up curveballs, so I can't complain or claim I'm shocked. I will get there, hook or crook. This is only the beginning of my journey in that regard. Remember, I'm struggling with my parents, and all I feel for them is apathy. I'm just having trouble feeling anything, and no matter what I do, I don't think that will change. My father has attempted to rekindle the relationship, but I am no longer interested. That may sound harsh, but it's the truth. I mentioned in my last post that I wanted them to put the house in my name, but I haven't followed up on that. I suppose I was just upset at the moment and wanted to demonstrate my power at the start of our chats, but I honestly couldn't care less about that house. I believe I would rather live in the house from the Nightmare on Elm Street than there. It wouldn't change anything. It can't go back in time unless it's been transformed into a time-traveling house since I left, or avoid what they did. It's just the tragic result of their decisions. To anyone considering about forgiving a cheater, please do not. I implore you. You're beating a dead horse. Don't be the person desperately attempting to extinguish fires sparked by your cheating partner while they happily renew them. After everything that has transpired, I feel stronger than ever, and I've learned from a number of infidelity support sites over the last year that if you don't cut your losses, you're setting yourself up for a world of suffering. Kind of a related story. But in the beginning of the year, I had a terrifying encounter when I cut the back of my pant leg on a metal dumpster while brushing up against it at work. I had no idea it had created a cut until I got home, and when I went to bed at night, I felt uncomfortable. I awoke about 2 a.m. My leg was pulsing. I felt deathly doubly dizzy, and alternated between a high fever and chills. I knew immediately away it could be sepsis. So I called an ambulance, which they said would take 2 hours or more because it was a Friday night and COVID was at its peak, and my thoughts were racing around my head while I was hyperventilating like crazy. Do you know what was the single thing that kept me calm when I was freaking out? I accepted the possibility of death, and for some reason I stopped being terrified. I'm not sure if it was the accepting fate mindset, but I accepted that it might be over. It removed all of the permutations from the equation, making everything much simpler and calmer. I've been thinking about it a lot lately, and my feelings regarding infidelity and betrayal are pretty similar. You must acknowledge that what you once had has passed. It is long gone. If someone is willing to plunder such depths and brutally stab you in the back for their own enjoyment, fighting an unwinnable struggle is admirable, but is it worthwhile when the chances of success are like those of a lottery? Is it worth the pain? I do not think so. I recognize that everyone's experience with children is unique, but certain fights are simply ridiculous. Accept that everything is over and things will soon become clearer. That's simply my opinion. It's funny, I haven't written about my ideas and feelings since high school. I work on rooftops for a living. This encounter, however, has brought out that aspect of me that I had almost forgotten existed. If this fiasco has taught me anything, it is that I will no longer keep things bottled up. It's been cathartic for me to put my feelings out there and see the wider picture of my predicament. Writing things down has benefited me more than I could have anticipated. Therefore, I plan to keep doing it, even if it's just writing to myself in a notebook or on a notepad. I believe there are times in your life when, all things considered, you can put a pin in and say things were on a knife edge that day and could have turned out differently. I fear to imagine what would have occurred if I hadn't asked for aid here or noticed the dog walkers. I'd probably have been blackout drunk at death's door in a ditch somewhere, or in jail for shooting Darren, aka Jacket Holder, straight through his effing window frame after tearing through his house like a tornado. To be honest, the thought of where I would be if things had gone wrong scares me. I was in a bad mood, and being drunk, ashamed, and enraged is a recipe for disaster, no matter how you slice it. Finally, I'm just relieved that I didn't damage myself or anyone else. The majority of my posts have focused on the details of what was going on. However, I believe the last several have been more about my feelings toward what has occurred. Betrayal generates such intense and invasive feelings. There's nothing quite like getting stabbed in the back by someone you care about. It is distinctive in many ways, and the feelings you experience as a result are also distinct, so thank you for listening me out. In my first post, I mentioned that I felt worse than I did the day before. Well, after everything has transpired, I feel like a stronger person. Here is the next story. Laura. My final year of college was full with challenges, which I shall discuss later. I barely managed to keep my GPA at 3.5 as I approached graduation. I was admitted to Princeton, but turned it down. I attended private schools in New York my entire life until enrolling at UCLA. Believing that Princeton would be just another private school jail, I persuaded my parents that if I did not display maturity and decent grades after a year at UCLA, I would return east and attend a more traditional institution, more suited for my parents' legacy. In the first year, I had a very good average score of 3.85. When I met my parents during summer break, I was overjoyed that I had completed the basic curriculum and insisted on continuing my studies on the West Coast. They reluctantly consented because I had fulfilled the minimum requirements of our contract. They gave in but were not pleased. I was thrilled. I studied while simultaneously spreading my wings of independence. My mother, who was always sensible and crafty, attempted to entice me with shopping excursions to New York and other social activities required in her circle. I gently declined, demonstrating my naivety. What could be better than enjoying the pleasures of life in the safe cocoon of money? Youth is definitely squandered on the young, returning for a second year. I discovered I had missed some freshman antics, as my father called them. I never had to be defiant in my first year, as my parents presumably assumed. I pledged to change that this year. I didn't intend to go crazy like my roommate Sheila, who partied every week without fail. But as I approached my 20s, it was time to have some fun. Sheila had always been popular with the males, no doubt due to her more liberal morals than I could afford. I was not a prude because I was already an adult at the time. I simply wasn't comfortable bouncing from one bed to the next in order to be popular by student standards or the life of the party by social norms. I was pickier about who I dated and more reticent in general. I've had a steady partner for the past year. I assume my mother was aware of this or had strong suspicions. Father, as usual, was unaware of such events. After commencing studies in my second year, I decided to update my literary style to something more 80s, inspired. At the time, I resembled a younger Linda Gray from Dallas, so I believed styling my hair like her would help me stand out while yet fitting in. At the time, huge hair was fashionable, and it took hours to style. I didn't want to put too much effort into my daily routine, so I went for a straighter hairdo with messy blonde bangs and shoulder-length hair. I beckoned them to one side or the other, depending on my mood. It looked good on me at the time, with my new hairstyle and light brown eyes. I felt attractive. Men undoubtedly noticed this. I seemed to be fighting off suitors both inside and outside of class. Several of the more progressive teachers felt I needed additional assistance, which they were willing to provide in their offices after class. I gently refused all of their offers. I was raised as a woman, and while I appreciated their attention, I felt compelled to choose my companion at my own discretion. About halfway through my second semester, I met Warren Blaylock. He seems friendly enough, if a touch distant at the time. He did not seem as interested in me or my appearance as the others, especially the academics. Warren seemed a little secretive, which piqued my interest. If you're being honest, I had no idea what Warren was in my Psychology 201 class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I completed Psychology 101 with flying honors. I enrolled in this course believing it would be simpler to maintain my GPA. My parents expected me to major in medicine by the middle of the year. I was torn between medicine and law, believing that I could pursue either path. A psychology course sounded like an excellent decision. Warren asked thoughtful questions in class and even after, when I accidentally bumped into him by dropping the books he was gathering up. Of course, he apologized for his awkwardness, which I respectfully declined. He invited me for coffee in the student union. Of course, I agreed, as that was my intention. Fortunately, Warren grasped the program following our somewhat uncomfortable introduction. We walked to the student union and chatted about our majors, instructors, student life, and other trivial matters. The chat over coffee seemed quite simple to me, but we did not discuss détente, but merely his impoverished student life. I discovered Warren is impoverished. Poverty is not a death sentence, nor is it evil. It's just that there has been a lot of money throughout my nearly 20-year baseline. I was surprised to learn that individuals have to work for a living. Looking back, I realize how uninformed I was of the world before the cries of spoiled, privileged females began. Remember, I grew up in an extremely insulated environment, attended private schools, and had nannies, maids, butlers, and drivers. My first year of college was spent studying rather than partying, as most freshmen do, so money was a given. I was spoilt to some level, but I believed I remained somewhat grounded in my ambitions of earning a bachelor's degree. Despite this, I could tell Warren was interested. Well, maybe a little, I hoped. I was interested. He was tall, clearly over 6 feet, thin, though I couldn't tell his weight, and well-built, with blue eyes and somewhat short blonde hair. Warren stated that he does not have time for sports because he works practically every night as a waiter at a local restaurant or as a bartender at one of the local sports bars. One thing that baffled me was his desire, as he put it, of getting wealthy. I probably dismissed it after a life of affluence, but the dream made sense to someone who didn't have it. He appeared enthralled with computers, which began to permeate the fabric of society in the mid-1980s. When we finished our coffee, Warren did not offer to take me to the apartment I shared with Sheila or invite me out on a more formal date. I was not insulted, just curious as to why my charms didn't appear to work on him. I took it as a personal challenge to pique his interest in me, at least enough to agree to a second date. When I returned to my apartment and saw Sheila, I began talking with her about Warren. Given Sheila's past, which we both knew well, it was clear why I was asking her, "Is there anything wrong with me today? Do I look okay?" "No, honey, you look fantastic. Why are you asking?" Sheila was quite laid back, originally from Georgia. Her accent sounded like delicious southern honey. Perhaps one of her attractions drew all the boys on campus. I recently had coffee with a gentleman from my psychology class. He seemed to be there, but uninterested in me. "So you found the lone guy on campus who doesn't have a crush on you." Sheila gave a big laugh. "Laura, you know how to choose." She kept laughing till she doubled over. This was beginning to upset me. This was becoming a blow to my pride, I realized. I'm not sure, but Warren seems different. Not because he didn't lie down in front of me to get into my pants. Perhaps he prefers guys, girl. Have you thought about it? This stunned me. I didn't think about it. However, in the 1980s, behaving this way openly was a relatively new phenomenon in mainstream society. I suppose it is possible that he prefers males, but I did not believe so. It's not like I had radar, as it was frequently referred as. He didn't give out the feeling that said, "I prefer guys." No, something else was happening here. I was certain of it. No, I didn't think he liked males, but I didn't get that impression. "Are there any additional ideas?" I inquired, grabbing at straws because I had never been rejected like that. It was kind, but not the reply I was expecting or hoping for from Warren. "Listen, Laura, if you need emotional support from me because your panties are in a twist over some guy you just met, I will provide it to you. If I am a 7 or 8 out of 10, you are an 11. Do not worry, honey. Maybe he just isn't interested in you. You know, damn it, I would sleep with you if we were both like that." I knew she was joking when she made her last remark. We both realized we weren't created that way. I believe it's possible. It simply never happened before, you know? Sheila grew more serious. "Relax, Laura. Over 30,000 students attend this university, and from what I've heard, there are a lot of guys there." She began giggling before continuing. "I'm confident you'll find one guy who wants to date you. Do not push yourself too hard, okay?" "Yes, of course." I guess you're correct. I ended the chat with Sheila, but it lingered in my mind. Classes and life went on till the conclusion of the semester. I smiled flirtatiously at Warren in psychology class, attempting to sit closer to him without being too obvious. He returned my grins, but never struck up a discussion until the conclusion of the semester. Finally, after finishing finals and turning in my blue books to the department, I needed the answers before heading home for Christmas break. Warren, do you have a minute? May I get you a cup of coffee? I opened my eyes wide in anticipation, attempting to be as flirtatious as possible, hoping that he would accept my genuine offer. I have another exam in 2 hours, but I believe I can find some time for coffee. He finally responded after careful thinking and checking his watch, and I thought, damn, what am I supposed to do to grab this guy's attention? Warren continued to contemplate. Actually, the student union is on my route to the next exam, so let's go, Laura. Right. Damn, he is checking my name. I mean, truly, I had a complex at that point. I was definitely out of my depth, but I was determined to figure out this reverse falling in love with myself. I washed my teeth this morning. My hair was nicely done. I wore skinny jeans, a lovely blue silk shirt, and conservative 2-inch sandals. I even applied some makeup to emphasize my eyes, blush on my cheeks, and a light gloss on my lips. I wasn't bad. I rocked on my heels and responded condescendingly. Yes, this is Laura. Thank you for remembering. We walked to the student union to discuss the psychological exam. I wanted to wait until we started drinking coffee before beginning my inquiry over coffee. I felt literally conflicted about asking questions. I remembered his confirmation of my name, which made my mood much worse. I just blurted out, possibly too loudly, "Do you prefer men?" He quickly glanced up from his coffee, looked around at everyone, and let out the deepest laugh I've ever heard. He paused for around 15 seconds before responding. No, I'm not as stupid as I seem. What is that intended to mean? Laura, believe it or not, I understand why you are asking. At least I believe so. Now that I think about it, please proceed. Because I still do not get this. Let's get this straight. Do you want to know why I did not notice you? Can I talk to you? Ask you out or try to entice you into bed, correct? As I spoke, I gave off a deer in the headlights appearance. Yeah, that's about it, he replied. Elementary, my dear Watson, imitating his best Sherlock Holmes. You're smart, so I'm confident you'll understand. But you're too attractive and wealthy. Now my spirit has truly lifted in a whisper that only Warren can hear. I said, what the hell does that mean? Sorry. I assumed it was obvious. Let me make this clear. You should realize that you are a really lovely woman. He paused for impact, allowing me to process his statement before asking if I liked guys. Says you can't take not being loved, chased, or courted, right? Yes, I responded directly while he appeared to read my thoughts, which was a little unsettling. And you're wealthy, right? I mean, you do not work. At least it did not come up during our last coffee. That indicates either you have a trust fund or mommy and daddy have enough money to keep you in this clothing, which probably costs more than I make in 1 week. My parents own money. So you think I am attractive? But you still haven't spoken to me this semester after I purposefully ran into you. I realize I gave up more of myself than I planned, but I needed him to see that I was very interested in him. As if he didn't notice, I was beginning to sound like a teen in love. Okay, thanks for clarifying. I thought I had taken the clumsiness pill when you dropped your books after barely bumping into me. His haughty attitude toward me was beginning to bother me. Who is this poor student to essentially humiliate me with the truth about my wealth and then have the arrogance to give me an indirect compliment on my appearance? Outrageous, unsatisfactory. I believe he put me in my place. Now that I think about it, no one has ever spoken to me like that before, especially someone who did not know me. Listen, I genuinely believe you're gorgeous. There are thousands of men who would give their right arm to be with you. You are the entire package. Looks, money, and intellect. But first, I need to finish my studies. Last time we had coffee, I told you that my goal is to get out of poverty. Studying is the primary step toward achieving this aim. Everything that was distracting me from this is no longer interesting to me, I answered fast. So you say you are interested in me, but not right now, if I have heard right. I attempted to keep some of my dignity. He chuckled slightly, possibly intending to throw me a bone. I suppose we may draw a conclusion here. Look, I wouldn't rule anything out in the future, but for now, all I can think about is my upcoming exam. Actually, I need to go to him. Laura, thank you for the coffee. See you next semester. When he went, I realized I had a lot to think about. He also unknowingly assisted me in selecting my major. Instead of attending medical school for 4 years after college, I decided to pursue a legal career. I believed that if I worked hard enough, I could finish law school in 2 years. I had to get out from under Mommy and Daddy as quickly as possible. I need to grow up. Warren was never far from my mind during my sophomore and junior years. Even though we never met, Warren apparently studied math and computer science, whereas I studied history, philosophy, and humanities. At least I convinced myself that he was not avoiding me. Yes, I couldn't get over the notion that my mere presence didn't shake his universe. It's still stuck in my throat as I end my 3rd year. I began to wonder again why it affected me so much that Warren had refused my advances. He seemed to be the first person or situation over which I had no control. However, there was something more. I was confident of this because I had refined my debating skills in class and was a member of the debate team. I asked myself contemplative questions one Saturday night while drinking wine in my now empty flat. Sheila was unable to keep up with her course load and dropped out to pursue a 2-year program at a local community college. We remained friendly. I could have used some of her worldly wisdom that evening. Do I care more for Warren than I'm ready to admit? I thought, this can't be love. I've never felt more than infatuation or desire to a Saturday night date in my life. I, too, was focused on my academics in order to begin my own career as soon as possible after graduating from law school. I realized a few things that helped me feel better. Warren had intimated that I was attractive during our previous talk. I had no trouble finding companions for any activities, even casual ones. If I needed to release stress, did I understand what love was? Probably not, I thought. But aside from Warren, I had no benchmark for comparison. Heck, we had coffee twice. Both times I took the initiative. To be honest, this cannot be love, I rationalized. The wine ran out and I decided to go to bed rather than fix this issue. This lonely chat over too much alcohol tormented me all summer in New York. When I returned for my 4th year, I planned to finish my undergraduate degree, take the LSAT, and go to law school. As I indicated at the start of this article, the previous year has been practically disastrous. Bill was the reason. Davenport. It hit me like a freight train when I began my 4th year, not literally but emotionally. He completely blew me away. His law course was transferred from Boise State University in Idaho. I couldn't even spell the word boys, let alone find it on a map. But that didn't bother me too much. By the 4th year of pre-law school, class sizes were rather small. There were also some group projects that required 3 to 5 people to work together, depending on the class. I initially met Bill in my contract law class. He wasn't the most stunning model at first glance, but he was extremely appealing. He had brown hair, brown eyes, and short hair, but he was confident. He stood 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and lengthy legs that looked great in shorts. He looked a little preppy in an alligator shirt and a blue or white shirt on top, which I thought intriguing given his Midwestern heritage. In one of our contract law group projects, I discovered that he was not meeting anyone because he had recently moved to the area and knew no one. We were discussing a modest 3-person initiative, which included another guy named Steve Jenkins. Steve was the quintessential book nerd, capable of quoting almost any judge's judgment on any constitutional issue. I believed he'd make a good addition to our little staff. Our homework was presented during the 2nd lecture. We were handed a contract and told that it had purposeful errors, and it was our team's responsibility to discover them all and change the language. Our final was an open debate in which we had to explain why we thought the language we had chosen was incorrect or erroneous, express our thoughts, and show the best correction. The contract was approximately 50 pages long and centered on a real estate transaction. I determined that we needed to spread the workload evenly. To accomplish the work, we carefully reviewed our piece of the contract and compared it to the rest of the language. Having been in close proximity with Bill during our twice-weekly group sessions, I recognized that he thought this assignment was a touch beneath his level. 2 weeks later, he had already outlined his section of the contract, including linguistic suggestions. I was amazed after only reading the full contract once. Steve made more progress throughout those 2 weeks than I did. Bill offered to share his analysis with the group. I, being stubborn and selfish, claimed that it was too soon. I needed 1 more week to do my own analysis before we began sharing our findings. I worked hard all week to get it into my section. I thought I performed well. The next week, I was prepared to compare notes. I even volunteered to start first once I finished. Bill got a smile on his face that stated, "Not bad, but you missed some subtle points." He began telling me how, if I simply modified the initial condition in my section and reformed it, all of the other countless changes would be unnecessary. I felt dumb since one alteration at the beginning altered the meaning of the entire contract. To be honest, he offered to buy the group some drinks. When we finished, Steve declined, stating that he wanted to study further. As usual, I found myself alone with the sharpest person in the class, allowing him to troll me. He did invite me to a drink, but he did not point out my fault. On the contrary, it was one of the most enjoyable times spent in the presence of a man. He appeared down to earth as if he knew something that the others didn't. Perhaps it was simply his confidence, indicating that he honestly believed success after law school was just around the horizon. He piqued my curiosity during our talk. We discussed ambitions, the future, and even our thoughts on marriage and children, which sounded bizarre to me at a time when law school was approaching and no one had time for dating, let alone marriage and children. I ignored the conversation as idle babble. We finished our contracts course with an A. The majority of the others in the class made the same error I did at first. They did not see the deal from the same perspective as Bill. I was encouraged by the fact that the rest of the class saw the contract in the same way as I did. My self-esteem was elevated. Bill and I went our separate ways over Christmas. I thought about Warren, of course, but not in the same way that I thought about Bill. I may have believed Bill was the real deal. Warren appeared to be an enigma. He would be too preoccupied with his own quest of fortune to be worth anything in a relationship. Even though I knew he was intelligent and hardworking, 2 critical success factors, I was pleasantly surprised when Bill called my parents' house the day after Christmas and asked, "Am I at home?" I didn't need a babysitter anymore, of course, but the butler answered the phone and asked for the caller's name. He repeated his name, Bill Davenport, before handing me the phone with his white glove, a little taken aback. "Hello, Bill. How did you receive this number?" This was long before cell phones were ubiquitous, and my parents' phone numbers were not displayed. I was quite curious. "Hello, Laura. You're correct. He's not on the list, as I discovered, but after some detective work, I discovered that you share an apartment with a girl named Sheila. She handed me your number, if I take her out for supper." He sounded quite proud. I'm sure Sheila was delighted to join Bill for supper. This little minx was probably wriggling and undressing, hoping to get Bill into bed as quickly as possible after supper. Bill proceeded as he sensed my uncertainty. "Let's just say I learned a few things about Sheila and you both." He stopped, leaving me alone with my thoughts about what this might entail. My fury began to build, but I quickly stopped and asked myself why. It's not like Bill and I have ever gone on a date, let alone kiss. We separated on good terms before the Christmas break. Was I jealous of this little slut because she could lay my boyfriend down? Maybe. "Laura, look. I asked Sheila to dinner. Assume she wasn't on her best behavior, but I was. I got your phone number, that is all. Because I am a gentleman, I will never kiss and tell. But since it didn't happen, there's nothing to report." I was relieved without knowing why. "So why are you contacting Mr. Private Investigator?" I responded, hoping to lighten the mood between us. More for my benefit than his. "Well, because my father is in New York for business this week and I am here with him and my mother, I was wondering if you would want to join us for dinner on Thursday night. I understand that it is short notice. It's only Monday, but this trip was a surprise for him, and my mother decided to join us to watch the play. My antennae went up if the trip was unexpected. How did he find the time to get my number? What happens after supper with Sheila? Something's wrong here." Instead of asking 20 questions over the phone, I accepted his invitation to dinner and asked further questions afterward. Thursday went by far faster than I imagined, with dress shopping, hairstyle, manicure, new shoes, and jewelry. Bill offered to pick me up, but I declined, stating that our driver would take me. I think it offended him little, but it didn't bother me at all. I wanted to make a good impression on both Bill and his parents. As a result, I've been focusing on personal hygiene and supper preparation. Bill, or perhaps his father, chose a restaurant at the Waldorf Astoria where I had previously dined with my mother several times, so I knew the meal would be excellent. Perhaps we had more in common than I had believed. This may be fun. I began looking forward to it. Bill met me at the limousine's door, but before the driver could get around him to open it, he assisted me. He wore an elegant dark blue suit, patent leather shoes, and a white handkerchief in the breast pocket of his jacket. He brought me to the table, which I saw was empty. Perhaps his parents went to freshen up and decided to do it jointly, but I noted just 2 areas were covered. I had trouble holding up the small black spaghetti strap dress with my blanket while balancing on my black 4-inch heels. I couldn't wear a bra with this dress, so I had to rely on my proud 36C to stand up straight this evening. I wore underpants and stockings because it was cold. Bill was extremely grateful and complimented me several times. I had not yet removed my shawl covering because I was still trembling from the cold. After walking 5 feet from the limo to the front entrance, the temperature was around 20 degrees Fahrenheit when I arrived at 7:30 p.m., half an hour later than intended. After we sat down, we exchanged compliments and greetings. I asked where his parents were. He told me they had gotten tickets to see the Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. They expressed disappointment that they would be unable to attend, but they were seldom visitors to New York, and his mother was excited to watch the show. Something about it sounded far-fetched, too convenient in my opinion. When he confessed, I followed up with a few questions to test his sincerity. Okay, Laura, I did come here with my folks, but we were on a family holiday. We had been planning this for 6 months. This is my final year of education before law school. When things get wild, and my parents have always wanted to visit New York, they are eager to meet you. But I chose this evening knowing that my mother had already purchased tickets to the show. I wanted to eat dinner with you, but I was terrified. What happens if I don't invite my parents? You will not agree. That is all. A true expression of his intentions. Finally, I assumed he'd succumb to my charms, like every other boy and man in my life. But after thinking about it, I gave in to him. This was definitely my last line of defense, and he smashed it when he admitted to chasing me. I felt so sexy and loved at the time that he went to such lengths to arrange a date with me. Dinner was excellent. Now that the truth was out, we were both equal. I truly loved Bill from the start. Not enough to fully forget Warren, but it was a good start. We shared childhood stories until the waiter came over for the 10th time and said that the restaurant was closing. Around the same moment, my driver entered the lobby. I could barely see the top of his cap coming through the door. I looked around and saw that the restaurant was deserted. We parted ways, holding hands and exchanging a quick kiss that left me wanting more as he assisted me into the limousine. This marked a turning moment in our relationship. From dinner the next night with his parents to mutual support throughout his 3-year law school career. Instead of my scheduled 2 attempts at the bar test, we both passed on the first try. It was almost unheard of, but I had expected it from Bill. I doubted myself a little, but I was proud of our shared accomplishments. We seemed like a nice couple. At least it seems balanced to me. We chose not to marry while in law school, choosing to live together. It was no surprise when we were both accepted to UCLA School of Law. Bill was approved due to his academic background and LSAT scores. I got accepted primarily because of my parents' generous donation to UCLA, as my LSAT scores were insufficient. Graduating with a 3.5 GPA did not damage my chances and went a long way toward easing perceptions during the entrance procedure. So, in some ways, I earned my spot in law school. Bill and I flew home from a whirlwind of law school graduation parties to attend an August wedding in New York City, complete with all the trappings of high society. My mother had a great time in her final semester of law school arranging, coordinating, and, of course, negotiating wedding details with some of her high-ranking socialites. That didn't really bother me. Bill and I have been together for more than 3 years. From my perspective, the wedding was practically anticlimactic. We had a wonderful honeymoon in Greece, which was paid for by my parents. I adored Bill and felt that he loved and respected me. During law school, we had almost little social life, preferring to find consolation in one another's arms and make passionate love whenever we could, despite our heavy workload. Our small two-bedroom apartment looked like a good place to start our union. Our bedroom served as a place for us to sleep and rest, while the second room was outfitted with 2 tables and chairs arranged such that we sat with our backs to each other for obvious reasons. It would be too easy for any of us to look up from our textbooks, notice the other, and immediately tumble into a sexual maelstrom. Marriage brought us to Chicago. Bill was offered an internship in the mergers and acquisitions department of a rather prestigious corporation. I chose a little less prominent work at a tiny local firm that, strangely enough, specialized in real estate. I believe my pre-law contract law course and subsequent group project with Bill are now beginning to pay off. It was a pleasant thought, actually. Consider how we met. I adored Bill for his knowledge, calm attitude, and consistent support throughout the latter half of my 4th year and into law school. He was a passionate lover who always prioritized my pleasure over his own. We seemed to be a perfect match. Aside from getting married and paying for law school, my parents elected to keep money out of our relationship, which I believe has benefited us much. Bill had a modest amount of money to pay for law school, but when it ran out, he accepted a job at a small legal office for the minimum salary during his final semester of law school. It crushed my heart to see him go to work, knowing that I could easily support both of us. I believe that males have pride, and as a result of his pride, he felt compelled to work in order to provide for himself. I accepted this, but never made it plain that I had more money than God did. I'm still not sure if Bill ever knew how much my parents were worth. I never told him, and he didn't ask. My father insisted on a prenuptial agreement, which we both scrutinized as thoroughly as the first real estate contract. We both saw nothing unusual in him. It became a minor incident. We were fortunate to purchase a little apartment on the Gold Coast facing Lake Michigan, near to the recently opened stores on Dearborn Street. I was in shopping bliss. It was a nice location to call home. It had its own butler, private parking, and lakefront views. What more could a couple advancing up the social ladder ask for? Nightlife is just a short cab ride away. The following 5 years were more challenging than I could have imagined. We were both approaching 30, working 60 to 70 hours per week to outperform our junior colleagues at law firms. Bill was then offered his first major position as the lead lawyer in a huge transaction. The client wasn't important. The conditions of the agreement are considerably more limited. When he was at home, he was almost completely unavailable to me emotionally, physically, and intellectually. I didn't seem destined for a successful career working on mundane residential contracts rather than the large real estate transactions I had anticipated for when I joined the firm. Bill appeared to be succeeding at his firm. To be honest, I have admired his accomplishments throughout the years, but I needed more. I suppose I was still the spoilt little princess that my parents raised me to be. The spoiled princess made herself known from time to time, but Bill lacked the patience and, frankly, the time to cope with her. He seemed dismissive at times, which I found really frustrating. I alluded about having children because I wanted them. Bill was unconcerned, even telling me that he believed children might not be in our best interest just now. He didn't want to be burdened with children while his profession was only getting started. This could have been the first betrayal since we talked marriage and children almost 8 years ago. It was far from the final discovery I made. I believe that in any relationship, the partner must learn to give and receive. However, I was more of a taker than a giver, and given my sorrow for being indulged, I began to wonder, what if Bill? My parents sent me to Boise State despite the fact that I grew up with limited resources. This left an impression on me. My older sister planned to pursue a nursing degree after graduation, but became pregnant instead. Much to my parents' disgust, the guy acted decently by proposing to marry her. My sister Yana declined his offer. It astonished me, but it nearly devastated my parents. We grew up Catholic in the rather large but extremely small town of Boise, Idaho. The younger brother took it in stride, never skipping a single study session, instead preferring to sit back and watch the drama play out. And so it was, and I moved on with minimal collateral harm. My sister had to deal with my parents' neglect and wrath, but they, like any parents, eventually grew to love and cherish their new grandchild, even bringing Jonah back into the fold. My older sister was like a beacon to me. She stood up front, seemingly accepting nasty comments from my parents, yet she remained proud when the dust settled. I grew to appreciate her decisions and sought her opinion on a variety of topics. I suppose she inherited some of my parents' rough edges because she was the first child. My mother claims that by the time I arrived, raising children had become easier. Perhaps she was merely fatigued. Perhaps Yana caused significant damage to my parents. One day, I asked Yana if she had to do it again if she regretted becoming pregnant. She swiftly responded that it was the best period of her life, both before and after. I was perplexed and asked her to explain. She said I felt needed, appreciated, loved, and sexy while performing it, and was pleased with the results. Why should I apologize? I believe this is a summary of Joanna's life philosophy. This made sense to me. I took a similar method. I had a fairly average high school experience and went to college, if that is possible. I had several odd girlfriends and a lot of guy pals, but nothing significant until Tracy Shield. She was modest, humble, and preferred to be the quiet student in her high school classrooms. That was until I got on stage and she consented to dance with me. I was the eldest, she was the youngest. There were high school kids there, and both juniors and seniors may attend the bachelor party or go on dates. I did not have a partner for this dance. Tracy was sitting alone while slow dancing, and I observed this. I asked her to dance. Her eyes shone like the Eiffel Tower at night. I suppose that when the elder asked her to dance, it was the same as all of her pals punching her a ticket to prove that she had street cred in the group. Although I didn't notice the squad hanging out with her or checking her ticket, the sensation of having her in my arms while slow dancing was something I couldn't describe or replicate, even during my college years. I kissed her on the cheek as the song ended. Her eyes were astonished yet yearning, as if she wanted me to kiss her on the lips. I was at least interested, if not more so. I had never been in love, so I had nothing to compare it to. We spent the summer as a couple, typically going to the movies or burger joints. We laughed all summer until about 2 weeks before school began. I felt comfortable being myself around Tracy. There was nothing pretentious about her. She referred to objects as shovels. She was around 5 feet 4 inches tall, with dark red hair and dark green grayish eyes, but firm and full of feminine appeal. While playing volleyball, it was evident that her size would prevent her from standing out. It felt less crucial than simply enjoying the game and having fun while playing it. She threw her heart and energy into practically everything she did, including academics and athletics. We never made love, and it wasn't for a want of trying. She appeared to be protecting something outside her innocence. I left for state college in the autumn. She knew this as well as I did, so I assumed she didn't put as much effort into the relationship as I did. She was probably shielding herself from the inevitable. It was enjoyable to spend the summer with her. I had big dreams. I made her a promise that I was confident I would honor. One of the few promises I'd ever made to anyone was to return to her in the future. She graciously accepted it for what it was, the conclusion of a summer romance. It was my fruitless attempt to learn from her disappointment by making a commitment. She did not cry. I think it was precisely what we expected. Bittersweet. Perhaps I have this feeling. Tracy stopped herself from falling entirely in love. I was almost certain that it was true. We parted ways as friends, with no chance of rekindling the joy and romance we shared at the time. Tracy remained in my thoughts throughout my freshman year. I did not concentrate on her. I was preoccupied with school. She was finishing her senior year of high school and taking part in all of the relevant events. Sometimes, after a few too many beers, I'd think about what if. After our summer walk, we parted ways. I knew Boise State was unimpressive for potential law students. That summer, following my freshman year, I started exploring for schools with a satellite law school. I assumed that if I graduated from their school with a bachelor's degree, it would make it easier for me to get into law school. UCLA operated both a pre-law program and a law school. I regarded this as my ticket to law school, if I could maintain my grades and score well on the LSAT. I set my sights on UCLA. I haven't determined when I'll take the leap because I haven't told my parents yet. I had no idea if they had enough money to pursue additional study like law school. I just finished my freshman year but have yet to declare my major. Over the summer, I attempted to contact Tracy. Her mother stated that she volunteered with the Peace Corps throughout the summer before attending college in the fall. She intended to attend community college for a year and then apply to Boise State at the conclusion of our chat. Her mother informed me her true feelings about me. Do you realize you broke her heart when you left? But I never completed my explanation. Do not worry. I understand you did not turn her on. You were at least old enough not to bring her along solely for sex, or so she says. She put up a brave face when you departed, but I knew she was in a lot of agony. In some ways, I'm relieved she didn't come here for the summer, and I'll have to go through that heartbreak again. I'll tell her you called the next time I speak with her, but that's it. Bill, I had planned to wish you luck in college. She hung up. Of course, I recognized where I fit in this family. If her mother thought it necessary to put me in my place, what does that reveal about Tracy, or particularly her father? When he met me, he would most likely have shot me. Tracy's mother was probably correct in some aspects. It would be unfair to Tracy to return home, fix the relationship, and then leave again. How to remove a scab from a wound that is healing but causing bleeding. It is preferable to leave it bandaged so that it can recover completely. My father sold life insurance. My mother's employment was at home. My sister, I, and my father were her career. When I left for college, Mom went to work in retail. She succeeded. She worked at a little bric-a-brac boutique that sold nautical items. I didn't understand how this store earned money in a landlocked state. She was happy. She and my father began having date evenings on Fridays. He picked her up from the store where she worked, and they went out to dinner. When I watched them in the summer, they both appeared to be extremely happy. In the fall, I returned for a second year. I planned to make an announcement around Christmas and inform my parents that I intend to transfer at some point in the future. My conversation with my folks was simply a formality. They saw my grades and understood I was capable of thinking clearly. I prepared my notes to make my case on all of the specifics of my decision, but from the start, they merely smiled and informed me that the decision was mine. They trusted that I had done my homework, and they did have money for law school. What a relief. It was the nicest Christmas present I could have gotten. My grades at the time were great. I nearly missed out on a 4.0, and my B+ average cost me a perfect GPA. During the Christmas break, I did my homework to talk my parents about transferring. I planned to do this between my second and third years. As it turned out, I couldn't get accepted to UCLA until my fourth year. Even with my excellent GPA, I had enough credits to finish on time. Getting in wasn't too difficult, except that there were no spaces available to transfer into the third-year pre-law program, so I had to wait until next year. The third course went by like lightning. I was preparing for the summer when Tracy suddenly entered my mind. I didn't think about her during my third year. Why did that occur to mind just now? Perhaps it was finishing my studies at UCLA, chasing my dream of becoming a lawyer, that made me realize I would most likely never return home. That's life, I suppose. A door opens, and another shuts. Last summer, I worked for my father's insurance company, largely performing clerical work, to help pay for my forthcoming fourth year at UCLA. I genuinely assisted my father with his company in the office. He even hosted a farewell lunch for the office personnel, which was rare for him. He also realized I would probably never return. Right before I departed for California, my father mentioned that he and my mother were going on vacation to New York and I was invited. I hadn't considered it at the time, but this could be our last family vacation together. Yana was invited, but she declined to go. She had 1 semester of nursing school remaining and was looking forward to caring for her son and resting over the Christmas break. I was delighted for her in some respects, since she was so close to graduating as a nurse, but also sad in others. I missed spending time with my childhood hero and hoped she'd change her mind so we could all celebrate together. I did not expect to fall in love so quickly after returning to school in the fall. I didn't know anyone, and school began the week before Labor Day. I found affordable off-campus lodging and shared it with 2 other guys I'd never met before. They appeared nice enough. I hadn't planned to spend much time in the flat, simply showering and sleeping. I studied hard to prepare for the LSAT in order to get into law school, so I spent the majority of my time in the library or in class. My one guilty pleasure was watching Dallas and Dynasty on Thursday nights while drinking a couple drinks. I always made time to spend those 2 hours per week catching up on the Ewing's antics. So it came as a surprise to me when I strolled into my contract law class and saw Linda Gray in her earlier years before becoming an actress. Sitting in class, I practically glanced twice. I was so confused that I nearly begged for her autograph before realizing where I was. I studied her from afar for a week before we were assigned to work in a group of 3 with another student named Steve Jenkins. Steve was pretty discreet and shy. He actually understood constitutional law better than anyone I'd ever met. I hoped to use his knowledge to boost my LSAT preparation. However, my entire attention was drawn to the third member in our little work group. Laura Greenstein won my heart right away. Perhaps it was her stunning similarity to the Dallas actress or her sex appeal, but as she walked into the room, I was clearly in love and almost there with love at first sight. Fortunately for me, contract law was a subject I was quite familiar with. After spending the summer researching insurance claims, verdicts, settlements, and policies, we received our assignments the following week. I quickly detected an error in the definition section at the beginning of my contract, which made the rest of the contract appear almost too straightforward. If I updated the definition in the declaration portion of this 50-page real estate agreement, everything else became rational, with only a few minor changes throughout the document. I could not believe how simple it was, so I spent the rest of the week going through it word by word. I couldn't uncover any other significant flaws. I felt quite good going into class the next week and telling the group that I was probably done. Laura was really excited because Steve and I were both ahead of her on the task. She asked for another week before we compared notes. I immediately agreed, primarily because I began to question that it could be so straightforward. We exchanged notes the following week, and Laura insisted on going first. I'm guessing she thought she had uncovered every detail and nuance that needed to be fixed. I was starting to feel dumb, like if I had completely missed the boat, listening to her assessment of the contract. But as I delivered my insight, Steve's light bulb went off, and he looked at his notes, and Laura, who sat across from him, puzzled. She was so sweet that I almost couldn't bear to destroy her enthusiasm if I was correct. She was personable and enthusiastic about her approach to the deal. I tried not to appear arrogant in my analysis. I opted to remain with my idea, which, if correct, would make the entire contract reasonable based on the parties' intents. We were instructed in class. Steve and Laura agreed instantly after considering my ideas. Laura grudgingly agrees. She said in a contemptuous tone, "I asked everyone over for drinks." Fortunately, Steve declined, leaving me with Laura exactly as I had hoped from the outset. I'm not sure what she was thinking while we were drinking, but I was certain that I was in love. We finished the course with an A, and the lecturer smirked, saying, "Finally, someone gets it." Our little working group felt very pleased about our efforts, even if Laura was still upset about not detecting the easy edit. Laura and I didn't really date or start a relationship until the conclusion of the semester, despite my desire to. I knew she was heading home for the holidays, so I decided to do some research. We shared phone numbers at our university residences, but I couldn't reach her in New York. A brief search through the white pages returned no hits. A plan was beginning to form in my thoughts based on the vacation my father had announced for the week following Christmas, but I needed to contact Laura to make it happen. I suppose you could call it chance or serendipity, but one day after class, I noticed Laura drinking coffee with someone in the student union. I skipped class to hang around and wait for them to go. She was hoping to catch her friend, and the man she was speaking with appeared to be a good friend. She was animated throughout her talk with Laura. I was hoping she had Laura's phone number in New York when they finished their coffee. I followed Laura's buddy from a distance until she reached her car. I reached out to her without knowing her name. "Excuse me, can we talk for a minute?" She whirled back, horrified, clutching her handbag tightly, her car keys in her hand, and what appeared to be a can of pepper spray hanging from her shoulder. Her keys. She undoubtedly saw me as a threat. I could hardly blame her, I suppose. "Hello, I'm Bill Davenport. I simply wanted to ask you a question." When I mentioned my name, she relaxed. I was still approximately 10 feet away from her. This felt unusual to me. "Hi, my name is Sheila. So you're Bill, correct?" She did not do you justice. You understand. It took me a few seconds to grasp. "Laura talked about me?" I responded with a stutter. "Honey, you were her sole topic of talk. And judging from the expression on your face, you're just as horrible at it as she is." So what would you like to ask me? I've healed sufficiently to ask her. Do you have Laura's number in New York? Eat. She paused abruptly, clearly not meaning to make my task any easier. Will you give it to me? Think. Her lips lifted slightly, but she did not attempt to remove the address book from her handbag. It occurred to me that she was going to have me beg her. I decided to activate lawyer mode and begin discussions. And under what conditions would you offer me her phone number? I'm not sure, actually. Her eyes were raised as if she was pondering. Not sure. What does this mean? You should be aware of the steps necessary to persuade you to give me her phone number. Oh, I'm sure I understand what it will require. I'm just not sure which restaurant to go to first. Her lifted lips spread into a wide smile, revealing her lovely white teeth. She had me and knew it. I began to feel apprehensive at this time. I'm sure she noticed my blush even from this distance, which had not changed since I had called her out. It sounded like this sweet southern girl was going to dictate the rules of the date. I'm not a local and don't know many restaurants, but if you pick one, I'll take you there at my expense. Oh, honey, I know it will be a treat, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Dinner first, and then we'll view your treat. Have you got a pen and paper? I believe I reddened even more. She gave me her address and ordered me to pick it up at 7 p.m. By this point, she will have decided which restaurant to visit. What have I put upon myself? I thought Laura was nice, but I was more interested in her. I wasn't going to do anything with Sheila that would require her to return to Laura at precisely 7 o'clock in the evening. I knocked on her door. She must have been waiting for me since the door opened immediately after I finished knocking. I was dressed in a blue button-down shirt, gray jeans, and a blue jacket, without knowing where we were going for dinner. She wore a black skirt that came a few inches over her knees and a bright red shirt. She was only a few inches shorter than me because she was wearing knee-high black boots and high heels. She licked her lips, asking him to kiss, revealing beautiful red lips. If Sheila attempted to seduce me, she did it flawlessly. I could not help but notice her. She applied cosmetics which made her face even cuter than it was without it. Earlier, she had tied her blonde hair in a ponytail. She combed and curled them till they hung down to her shoulders. Overall, she was quite gorgeous. She told me the restaurant to go to while I was driving. As soon as we parked, I approached her and assisted her out of the car. I couldn't be certain, but it appeared that she purposefully flashed her red panties at me as she stepped out of the car. Now my face matched the hue of her blouse. She grinned broadly, indicating that she knew I would be watching and was pleased to oblige. I mentally hit myself in order to recall why I was here. The eatery resembled a family Italian restaurant, with red checkered tables and waiters dressed in tuxedo shirts. She must have booked a reservation, as the hostess instantly directed us to a small, private table in the rear. When we sat down to order our beverages, she handed me a folded piece of paper. Regardless of what happens, here is Sheila's number. I relaxed. Thank you, Sheila. I honestly expressed my gratitude. I hope you understood that I was joking earlier. Although you are quite cute, I may change my mind after supper. She flashed me her finest smile with lifted brows, thinking that I would respond in kind. Thank you for the compliment, but you will probably be unable to manage me, I said with a serious face so she wouldn't realize I was joking. Honey, I don't doubt it. Do you truly want to find out? Because I am certain I would die trying. How fast everything changed in her favor again. You know what? Let's call a ceasefire and enjoy dinner. Agreed. You got it correctly. Okay, I will accept your peace offer. The cuisine here is absolutely amazing. We got into a lovely chat over dinner. I finished my coffee before driving Sheila back to her place. I extended my hand for a handshake, but Sheila seized my hand in hers, luring me in for a hot kiss that I barely avoided by moving my head so she kissed my cheek. You're truly in love, right? Because I know it isn't my fault. Sheila, I had a great time tonight. In other situations, you are both witty and handsome. Well, who knows? I simply left the thought incomplete. The hint was plain. I found her attractive and definitely interesting. But the only reason I was with her was to gain Laura's phone number. She winked at me as I left. She scared me slightly. Someone would be overjoyed to have so much charisma in one bundle. I packed my belongings and left for Idaho as soon as my final exam was completed. I called Laura in New York the day after Christmas and suggested we go out to supper. I assured her that my parents were also present and would join us. She consented, but requested that the driver drive me. I was hoping to tell her the truth. My parents were in New York, but they were going to a theater, so dinner would be just the two of us. Everything went well since when she came, she noticed a table for two. I told her honestly about my experience with Sheila, as well as the fact that my parents were on a long-planned vacation. She seemed to handle it well and didn't hold me too accountable for my deception. We enjoyed a wonderful supper and spoke about everything from religion to politics, hearkening back to law school. Our perspectives on practically every issue were similar, at least for me. We ended up closing the restaurant. We parted with a passionate kiss and a commitment to eat dinner with my parents the next night. When we returned to class, we were nearly inseparable. I spent more time in her apartment than she did in mine because I had roommates. I was pretty certain after supper in New York that I wanted to marry her. We discussed this while we were wrapping up our final semester of college study and graduating with honors. Neither of us visited home over the summer between undergrad and law school. I moved into her flat, and we cheerfully shared everything. We decided to postpone the wedding until after law school. We were exclusive throughout law school, assisting one another with a massive quantity of course information. After 3 years of apparently never-ending studies simply to remain afloat, we married. Her mother planned practically everything while Laura and I were studying for the bar exam, but our 2 weeks in Greece for our honeymoon were ideal. I honestly felt we had all we could want. Two folks are completely in love. Brilliant careers lie ahead of us. Job offers are in hand, as is the prospect of enjoying each other and eventually having children. Looking back, the turning point in our relationship occurred when I was appointed lead counsel in a takeover matter. We're 5 years into our jobs and marriage. It was a massive invasion that took much investigation and hundreds of hours of labor. I almost lived in this business for 6 months. I left Laura alone for the majority of this period. We both had few friends in Chicago because we had spent our entire lives living elsewhere. She seemed to find comfort in shopping or retail therapy, as she referred to it. I dedicated my heart, mind, and soul to the accomplishment of this transaction for our client. After the transaction was finalized, my company's partners recognized my efforts and awarded me a $100,000 incentive. Whatever I got financially, I lost in my relationship with Laura. When everything settled down, she was pleased and proud of my efforts. However, things were not the same. Our love relationship was not very passionate. Dinner was not as tasty as it had been in her modest apartment during law school when we ate hot dogs and chili. Laura, who grew up in a wealthy family, was always a privileged girl who matured into a woman. I never doubted her love for me. I just assumed the charm had worn off and determined to attempt to rekindle the intimacy we'd lost. Although Laura never told me, I believe she disliked me for all of the effort I put on this takeover, so I tried to reduce my job hours so I could spend more time with Laura and our relationship. She appeared grateful, but as I mentioned, the gloss was difficult to regain. I did my best. I truly tried. I knew I had ignored her, but I assumed she was grown enough to recognize that life is not a straight road to the finish line. I understood she had made a sacrifice by accepting a real estate position with a local firm. I knew it meant more to her than money. Growing up, she had plenty of money. I couldn't compete with it. I think in my foolish way, I made it about money. I attempted to prove to Laura and the rest of the world that I could do it. It had never meant anything to her. She most likely assumed that money motivated me to work so hard to close the deal. This is simply not true. First and foremost, I was unaware that my firm would pay me a bonus. For me, it was all about success. Prove your success on your chosen path. I needed to feel useful and needed in the world. Looking back, that doesn't seem very noble. Of course, she understood that my affections for her had nothing to do with money. We signed a prenuptial agreement which almost assured that I would not be able to benefit from her fortune. I just proven to the world that I do not need Laura's money. Surely she could tell I was self-sufficient. Maybe if I had told Laura that I needed to establish my worth as a lawyer, she would have understood how the takeover affected me. Perhaps she would agree. She was lovely, although not as encouraging as I would have liked at times. She was a feisty, spoiled, young, affluent girl who always had her way. I assumed she realized that sometimes there are more important things in life than herself. Despite everything, I adored her. The next case I handled was the largest since I joined the firm. This was not a regular residential closing, but rather a substantial commercial transaction. This entailed rezoning a plot of land for the construction of an office building. The company that hired us was a computer startup wanting to grow into the Chicago area. I concentrated on rezoning because the client's request was practically unattainable. The customer wants to rezone a Lake Michigan site to develop a new office complex. Zone modifications happened regularly. ITS firm has testified in numerous hearings on this issue on behalf of its clients. However, rezoning the location from residential to commercial on or near a lake proved difficult. I read the documents and was familiar with all of the zoning restrictions. I investigated all examples where zoning was modified for a specified reason. The client's chances did not look encouraging. I went to the firm's top partners and informed them that I did not believe the client's request was realistic. Their response was straightforward. Do it. This is something a partner might do. The fact that they were offering me a chance for partnership if I closed this business was extremely encouraging. Maybe Bill's success and subsequent bonus increased my goals, but I spent a lot of time and mental energy trying to figure out how to shift the client's zone to commercial. My attempts were fruitless. I was outraged and contacted my father. He will care for his princess. And he did. The commission provided no notice of the rezoning hearing, as soon as the chairman declared that the zoning had been altered. To my astonishment, I believe I had always known my father was wealthy and influential. It finally showed up. I shrugged. The formal closing of the transaction occurred the following Friday. I expected the client's lawyer to arrive, as she had handled everything up to that point. Warren Blaylock entered with a stunning brunette, whom I presumed was his lawyer. I was so astonished that I excused myself and went to the ladies' room to gather my thoughts. My helper followed me to the toilet. You look like you saw a ghost. What is wrong? Marcia? This guy attended college with me. She did not need to ask any further inquiries. She was familiar with my background. Probably better than most, but I didn't tell anyone at the firm. I sat in the booth and collected my thoughts. The rezoning hearing has been completed. The hardest part is over. Thank you, Dad. All I needed to do was clinch the deal. I had to do it for the company, myself, and the client, Warren Blaylock. I collected myself after spraying cold water on my face. I needed to reapply my makeup, but it was a little price to pay for relieving my anxiety. Marcia stayed with me as I prepared, asking questions. So this is the man you were talking about in college, and I didn't respond immediately. I am still applying my makeup. So she interpreted that as license to proceed. He is handsome. But aren't you married? Yes. So what is the problem? He isn't just a client. He's the one man who has never wanted me. I fell silent. Oh, so he was the one who passed up the opportunity. Marcia was moderately intelligent, but only for herself. She compensated for her lack of intelligence with her large breasts. Every man in the office threw pencils at her, hoping she'd bend over and show off her incredible cleavage. Not exactly the person who missed out. Perhaps the one I could not have, or perhaps the one who did not want me. Honey, you've got Bill, and if you grow tired of him, remember who your friends are. Okay, now you need to finish your makeup so that we can finalize this deal. Do you think you can pull yourself together to finish this? Yes, I believe I could. I didn't feel very confident, but I didn't want her to notice my hesitancy. We returned to the conference room. I presented myself to Bill's lawyer, Laura Davenport, emphasizing Davenport since I knew Warren would recognize my maiden name, Greenstein, presuming I was married. She definitely didn't realize I already knew Warren. Warren didn't tell her this when I was nervous in the lavatory because she presented me to Warren Blaylock as if I knew nothing about him. Warren didn't have a wedding band, but that didn't seem to matter, at least not right now. He decided not to inform his lawyer that he knew me, which was acceptable by me. I hope all of the documentation are in order and that we can sign the bottom line. Cynthia, his lawyer, asked him once the water operations were completed. Yes, everything is good, I said evenly, attempting to revert to the state of a lawyer with nods across the table. The signature and transfer of paperwork from left to right started. Marcia was a notary, so she promptly notarized each document after it was signed. Within 15 minutes, all documents had been signed. Warren interrupted me as I stood up to express my gratitude to everyone. Laura. Cynthia, I'll take our copies to the office to register. Can you spare me 15 minutes for a cup of coffee? I believe I noticed a cafe right next to your building. I'd like to remember the old times. Cynthia looked at Warren, then at me. I looked like I had just been summoned to stand in front of a firing squad. Marcia offered me signals hinting that I should decline Warren's invitation. Perhaps she expected me to accept in order to gain influence over Bill, or both. I was too perplexed to think at the time. I have a meeting across town, but I think I can take a few minutes for a coffee. Let me get my briefcase and purse. Meet me in the lobby, I replied. It's funny to think back 10 years later, Warren said something similar to me the last time we had coffee. We met in the lobby a few minutes later. Laura, to be honest, you are more gorgeous today than you were in college, but I believe you already know that. And judging from the diamond on your finger, I believe your husband tells you this all the time. I grinned internally at his remark regarding my attractiveness, but chose to dismiss it. Instead, I thought, this is what you could have if you weren't so busy finishing school and making money. We are telling it in my brain. It sounded empty. There was nothing wrong with war, setting objectives and pursuing what he truly desired. I guess I was still unable to accept the truth that he did not want me. The cafe is just around the corner. We need to go so I can get to my meeting. I began walking, but Warren softly grabbed my elbow, causing me to turn around. Laura, it's lovely to see you, he remarked, looking into my eyes with true emotion, which I felt all the way to my toes. It's good to see you, Warren. I didn't realize you'd be here. I just knew the firm name and your lawyer's name, so I was as astonished as you when you strolled into my office. But we really need to go if we want to consume this coffee. I smiled at him for a second. We walked silently to the cafe. I grabbed a seat as Warren got coffee for us. He even remembered how much I enjoy coffee with 2 teaspoons of sugar. This startled me since of all the ordinary information to remember about someone, remembering a coffee preference 10 years later appeared unusual. He lost no time in opening the subject with a somewhat unexpected statement. I have a small confession. This amazed me. I knew you'd be the attorney representing the property and the closure. How? How could you know that? I was astounded by his disclosure. How? It's simple, my dear Watson. He was impersonating Sherlock Holmes again, exactly as he had done the previous time we had coffee. I asked you to become a lawyer, and from what I gather, you will most likely be offered a partnership. Thank you for the rezoning and closing of the agreement. You are welcome. Warren, what type of game are you playing? Are you claiming that one of the senior partners is your friend? That you called and begged for a favor? It's not very lawyerly of me to accuse our client of breaking ethical rules, but I was perplexed. A wise businessman is always aware of the participants in the game. I've made it a point to always understand who I'm dealing with. Darrell Strong, your business partner, helped me organize my first corporation many years ago, before he joined your firm. I knew him, and when my business was expanding in Chicago, I asked him for a referral. As simple as that. This does not explain why I was assigned to your case. No, you're correct. I requested Darrell to nominate you. He responded boldly. How did you know that? I work for the company. Right then, a bright bulb went off in my muddled brain. He must have been tracking my progress or at least checking up on my whereabouts since college. At first, I was worried because I assumed he was following me. I blushed slightly when he implied that he had always been interested in me. My flush turned into warmth throughout my body. I felt wanted again, the way Bill made me feel the first Christmas before we got married. Warren lifted his eyebrows in an inquiring gesture. I get it. I have my own version, but I'd like to hear yours. I responded in the way of a lawyer. Oh, the lawyer is back. Okay, as you could expect, I've been keeping an eye on you since college. Not that I hired a private detective or anything, but I kept you informed. Remember Sheila? Your roommate is exploiting Sheila again, just like Bill. She and I remained at least casual friends over time. We spoke many times a year, simply about our lives. I believe Warren discovered a technique to know where I am. I wonder whether they mentioned Sheila and myself during pillow conversation. So, Warren, what do you want? Even I felt that my tone was contentious. I would like to have supper with you. I do not think that is a good idea. I am not sure my hubby would appreciate it. I didn't say you couldn't take him, did I? Warren, didn't we say everything we needed to say that day at the student union? I mean, after accusing you of being a male lover. I'm astonished you're even speaking to me anymore, let alone hiring me as your lawyer for this real estate transaction. I never stated that I didn't want to be friends back then. If I recall well, you were overconfident, therefore the problem was never raised. What is the point? The idea, then and now, is that I simply want to be friends with you, your spouse, and your other pals. I've just moved to the city. I don't know anyone other than my business colleagues. It would be fun to get out with locals and learn more about Chicago. Is something wrong with that? Warren was beginning to sound annoyed. I will ask my hubby and let you know. How do you like it? Still retain a grudge? Because I rejected you so many years ago, what? No, absolutely not. I believe so. I can see that in your body language, which does not match what you say. What exactly is my body language telling you that contradicts my words? First and foremost, despite your marital status, you appear to be available. Your posture is somewhat straighter, and your eyes convey your emotions with each word you say. Despite your argument that your husband would not enjoy it if we... Let us have dinner. I don't think you truly mean it. I believe it is merely a smokescreen. Well, I believe your crystal ball has a few cracks. You should take it to the dealer and have it checked. I'm happily married. Thank you. I didn't say it with complete scorn, but it was close. I didn't even say it persuasively to myself. Of course, that was a tiny lie. I was not fully satisfied with Bill. He attempted to address this by spending more time with me following his major acquisition, but it appears like it will be a long road back to where we were, at least for me. Okay, my offer is still valid for you and your husband. I don't want you to be late for your next appointment, so you should probably leave now to arrive on time. By Laura. And with that, he stood up and departed. I still sat there, feeling like a child who had been chastised for something I didn't even understand. He quickly sent me away, leaving me sitting there like an idiot. I pondered about this meeting for nearly a minute before checking my watch. I really needed to go to my next appointment. My life went quite smoothly for the next 2 weeks. However, Warren was never far from my mind. I'm sure Bill observed my sad moments. He went out of his way to entice me with dinners and unexpected lunches. I always agreed because I deeply loved Bill. Perhaps I liked him for his confidence and encouragement, as well as the fact that he enabled us both go through law school without scratching each other's eyes or going insane. I was perplexed about my emotions. The firm offered me a full partnership, which I gladly accepted. The announcement party was attended by all employees, their spouses, and significant others, and Warren Blaylock. Much to my surprise, otherwise a very pleasant time in my life, almost became a personal disaster. I constantly attempted to keep Bill away from Warren so that neither of us would have to deal with this unpleasant situation. Warren fixed his gaze on Bill, and I watched. Warren glanced at me, and I observed. I watched as Marshall observed the entire affair with almost childlike eagerness, expecting to get a chance at Bill if our cart went off the tracks. I was determined not to let it happen. After so many years, I was called to Warren again. It had almost hypnotic control over me. I mentally punched myself to get out of my what-if pondering. Fortunately, the evening concluded without incident. That night, I returned home and desperately pushed myself into Bill's arms, nearly pleading him to love me, take me, and make me your own. He did it without question. Later, he asked me, "Not that I am complaining, but what happened to you tonight, darling? You appeared possessed. I love you, Bill. I am yours, that is all. I'm really happy. Perhaps the champagne helped a little, but not much. Would you mind?" "Hell no, Laura. It was like old times for us. I'm very proud of you and your partnership. I believe this is the beginning of something fantastic for you. I'm glad for us. Laura, I love you." Bill finished, and I was already falling asleep with my head on his chest. Bill soon began breathing rhythmically, indicating that he was fast asleep. We went to Dreamland together. I nearly lost my cool during my first lunch with Warren, around 3 months into our collaboration. Up until this point, I had successfully used work pressure as an excuse to avoid going out to lunch with him. Even then, I knew my feelings for Warren were fragile, like a porcelain doll standing on the brink of a shattered shelf. If he started shaking the floor, I'd collapse helplessly into his arms. I fully involved myself in the partnership, taking on any difficult cases that came. I just couldn't admit to myself that Warren was impacting or might affect my marriage. I was confident in my position, if not my abilities, and frequently exhibited them to partners, providing additional evidence that I was partnership material. On a Friday afternoon with nothing essential on my schedule, I gave in and agreed to meet Warren for lunch. This was my undoing. Sitting opposite him, I saw yearning in his eyes. This has nothing to do with college studies, tests, or earning the first million. It was exclusively aimed at me. He may have rejected me years ago, but looking into his eyes today, a casual observer would never know. On a frigid February day, it lit me up from our hidden table in the restaurant's back. Warren was his affable, self-confident, and occasionally sardonic self. So much so that I struggled to follow his presentation on computers and their impact on society. I undoubtedly appeared lost in my own thoughts throughout the chat, but Warren simply grinned. Then he did what I assumed was predetermined, although I never admitted to myself that I desired it. "Laura, I understand that you are terrified. I see it in your eyes. Remember, eyes do not lie. They explain all I need to know. I am not sure where you are going with this. I understand, and so do you. I want you. I need you to be present. I want you to be mine. I want to be yours. I understand you're married, which makes things a little more complicated, but it doesn't really matter to me. I can see your soul through your eyes. You want me to." Oh, God help me. I really wanted Warren. Damn it, I wanted his children. I was almost soft at that point, not from the liquor, but from his admission to me that he desired me. It was worse than high school or my supposed crush in college. He put me in a terrible situation. Bill would say, "I'm watching basketball. Will I concede and let him score? Will I resist and defend myself?" I attempted to protect myself for the first time in my life. Something I really wanted years ago and thought was out of reach returned to my life, occupying at least a portion of my heart, soul, and body. I was almost unable to resist, but I tried. "I truly tried, Warren. I adore my spouse. You should know that I cannot betray him," he responded immediately, anticipating my uncertainty. "I understand, and I would not expect it from you. So why are you telling me this? I won't use Sherlock Holmes tactics this time, but it's actually fairly straightforward. Laura, I love you. I've loved you since the day you dropped your books and blamed me." He grinned nostalgically. "And here it is, sitting there like a softball waiting to be hit, or a pregnancy-induced silence between us." For a brief instant, the globe appeared to come to a halt and tilt off its axis. I was completely confused. The thought that Warren loved me nearly overpowered me. I burst into tears, which was unusual for me in any work environment, let alone with Bill. Only when the stress or strain of job, law school, or life became unbearable did I express my emotions discreetly. I took out some tissues from my handbag to attempt to stop the tears, but they streamed uncontrollably. I came to my senses. I thanked Warren for lunch and went back to the office. Marcia stared at me and knew what had happened. I blew her off because I wasn't ready to give her hope that I could change my mind about marriage. I was obviously perplexed. I knew what I had with Bill, and I would never purposely injure him. If I let this go on, I knew I was going to get into trouble with Warren, and yet I nearly felt powerless to prevent the unavoidable calamity that would occur if I kept closing the office door. I started to dispute with myself. Do I truly adore Bill? Yes. Do I actually want Warren? Yes. Do I actually know Warren? No, I had to answer truthfully. I still knew him. He seemed to be the same Warren I knew from college. He was determined, aiming for achievement. He was certainly as gorgeous as I remembered. He has matured with age. It is apparent that he has been successful in his business. Have he shared his achievement goals with me? I couldn't answer this question. Then I thought about Bill again. If I had told him I had lunch with an old college friend, he would have undoubtedly asked me who it was. Will my actions pass the spouse test? I didn't believe it would go away. What would I think if the situation were reversed, and Bill was having lunch with an old girlfriend he used to have feelings for? Nothing good was my response. I have already crossed the line. I could easily change the line in my head, but Bill's line would not move, nor would mine if he did it to me. Guilt began to hit me like ribbons before a hurricane. I felt nauseous. I grabbed my coat and left the office, informing Marcia that I was not feeling well. She probably ate the wrong thing for lunch. She appeared satisfied with this explanation. When I returned to the office, I realized my behavior was weird. Bill and I adored one another. It was true to the extent that I admitted it. Warren was also one of my favorite people. For the past 6 months, I've felt like two distinct persons. I'll admit it. Bill helped me get through law school and made me a better lawyer than I would have been otherwise. But Warren was the man I was meant to be with. As Marcia mentioned, the one who missed out. No, Warren was the one who didn't want me at the time. But I can't say that anymore. He pursued me with a fervor I had never witnessed before. He didn't care that I was married. I was, and I felt guilty every minute of the day. Something needed to change, otherwise I'd have a nervous breakdown by any standard. I had an emotional affair with Warren, fully aware of where it was going. I'm sure Warren knew as well. Lunch twice a week evolved into sporadic dinners. I refused to become intimate with Warren in any way, including his small touches during meals and a chaste kiss as a greeting or farewell. Every time I saw him, my resolve weakened. I needed to channel my remorse into productive actions to alleviate the frequent sense of betrayal. I had to either quit visiting Warren completely and commit to the marriage, or figure out how to make Bill happy if I went to Warren. There was little doubt that my relationship with Bill was deteriorating as I dealt with the mental guilt of seeing Warren, despite the fact that it was strictly platonic. In my head, it was a line. I had a platonic friendship with Warren. He was simply another friend who happened to be a man and for whom I had strong sentiments. According to any marital exams I'd seen, it wasn't really platonic. I started hating myself. Bill observed a difference in my conduct. I really tried to put on a good front for Bill. He accused me of this repeatedly. I dismissed it as added stress from the collaboration. I was a woman in a man's world, even in the 1990s, as a partner in a successful law firm. One evening, I indicated that we should consider starting a family. I foolishly assumed that having children would strengthen our link and allow me to progressively distance myself from Warren. Bill nearly ruined me that night when I brought up the matter over dinner at Morton's Steakhouse, one of our favorite restaurants. He appeared to have turned utterly against children. He tried to calm me down while being non-committal. Maybe in the future, when we initially chatted about everything in life at an off-campus pub, he made it clear to me that he completely supported children, which I thought was a vital component of any marriage. At the time in college, the subject merely added another favorable item to my mental list of compatible spouses. Bill's refusal to have children, or at least his cooling of the concept of children in our marriage, most likely prompted me to seek the solution I found. Bill hurt me with less words than I imagined possible. He noticed this fast, not because of my abrupt response to dispute with him, but because of my entire silence for the remainder of the supper. He tried to soothe me with the idea of a trip to Europe, which we'd been planned since law school. I could visit Europe at any moment, but experiencing it with children would be more enjoyable for me. No, the weights had shifted away from Bill and toward Warren, who I knew urgently desired children. He truly wanted to scale down his career goals and focus on family life, which I found sweet. At least, that is what he told me. The line shifted again in my thoughts. Rationalization is an excellent notion. It enables our subconscious to incorporate concepts into our consciousness that we would not otherwise consider logically. Maybe the heart wants anything it wants. I simply asked my subconscious to provide a plausible explanation for how I could have Warren without harming Bill. Deep lie, I desired Warren. If those two facts were true, he clearly wanted me. Where does this leave Bill in the equation? Left out in the cold, if I read it. Although his decision regarding the children upset me, I couldn't simply turn around and betray him out of anger. I still appreciated everything he did for and with me. I assumed that one act of child abandonment had caused me to fall out of love with Bill. It wasn't that I didn't love him. A potential answer occurred to me on the way to work on Monday morning, following our unfortunate supper on Saturday. If I could envision someone, not just anybody, Bill's former love, perhaps he would fall out of love with me. It's not easy, as I stated, but it would immensely relieve my conscience to believe that if Bill was happy with someone else, I deserved to be happy as well, right? Thinking about it, this was considerably more manipulative than I'd ever been with anyone, let alone someone I claimed to love. But if Bill had so easily abandoned his pledge to have children with someone he claimed to love, could I have tried to manipulate his emotions to get him to fall out of love with me? Perhaps that was my conclusion. The issue was that I had little or no knowledge of his past before meeting him. I was so concentrated on my plan on the way to work that I didn't spot Warren sitting outside my office, evidently waiting for me. Marcia stood between us as I opened the office door. "Mr. Blaylock is here to meet with you, even though he doesn't have an appointment." I told him that he needed to call the office to schedule an appointment. I was not clear why Marcia was so formal. I could see Warren. I suppose Marcia and I will have a discussion later. Although he never arrived unexpectedly, it was not unexpected given my day off. I was equally formal with Warren, mainly for Marcia's sake, Mr. Blaylock. I had only a few minutes until my first appointment. It would be ideal if you scheduled an appointment so that I could devote my whole attention to you. This will only take a few minutes. Can we come to your office, please? Perhaps Marcia felt justified because I supported her perspective, that everyone requires records. I noticed a small smile on her face. I reluctantly agreed to spend a few minutes with Warren, allowed him into my office, and closed the door. Thank you for meeting with me. I will get right to the point. I am going away for a few months. I wanted to tell you in person. This caused a shudder in my heart. Quickly gathering myself, I asked, so why did you feel the need to tell me this in person? Plans here in Chicago are on track. We should be relocating into a new building in less than 60 days. I've scheduled a meeting with investors in Stuttgart to discuss plans for a major European expansion. After that, the business plan is nearly complete. Warren, you do not owe me an explanation of your location or business plans. Why are you telling me this? Laura, remember when I told you about my college plans? Yes. Vaguely, I believe. Allow me to refresh your memory after I establish a foothold in the American market. I'm going to expand my operations into Europe. This is the final piece of the puzzle. If the expansion from Chicago to the West Coast proves successful, Europe will be the next step. This is the final piece. Once this is completed, I intend to sell the company. But Warren, you are only in your early 30s like me. What are you planning to do? You have approximately 90 days to answer this question. Now, I want to thank you for meeting without an appointment. I promised Marcia that I would be more attentive in the future. Oh yes, just one more thing. I love you, and I know you'll love me for 90 days. Laura, I'll come back to answer your question. He kissed my cheek. He exited, closing the door behind him. Warren once again left me breathless and stunned while sitting in your office. As soon as the door shut, Marcia knocked. Come in, I murmured faintly. Are you okay? You appear to have seen a ghost again. What is going on with Mr. Blaylock? You appear absolutely foolish when he is present. Oh yes, and your meeting at 9 o'clock has begun. Marcia was more correct than I'd want to admit to her or myself. I was thinking about something silly on my way to work this morning. Warren allegedly given me a deadline for something I didn't know for sure but could assume. He wanted to know where I stood in my relationship with him and Bill. Do I love him enough to leave my husband? And he assigned me a deadline. It was annoying. It drove me insane. I sensed Warren's absence almost immediately after he left my office. It did not make sense. If only, as he said, he knew how much I loved him. Perhaps I truly adore him on some level. No, I confessed, I love him deeply. Marcia, please schedule my meeting for 9 a.m. and thank you. I believe Mr. Blaylock will make appointments in the future. He apologized and requested me to notify you. He just arrived and did not want to squander a day or an hour. The first item on the agenda was further information concerning my husband's previous affairs. It would have been so simple to ask his sister Joanna, but because he was a transfer student, I only met his boys' state buddies briefly during our wedding. I couldn't even recall their names. I could have checked the wedding guest list, but none of the options I considered made logical. Frustrated by the lack of progress, I called my mother about lunchtime while her father worked. She formed connections. She served as the family's antragar. My dad was a, whatever you see is what you get, man. My mother, on the other hand, was like an iron hand wearing a silk glove. She may strike unexpectedly, remove the glove and depart. No mark. I needed my mother by my side. Bill formed a relationship to my father. My father grew fonder of Bill as he achieved greater success. I didn't need a split vote in this decision. I will leave it to my mother to persuade my father. She was more than capable. I spent several years away from my parents' house, attempting to establish myself in my work. After speaking with my mother and not wanting to reveal my plans over the phone, I invited myself to visit her for a few days. I stated I hadn't seen you in a long time because that was true. I informed Bill about my upcoming vacation. He did not respond much to this chat, but wished me a pleasant visit. The next Monday, I took a very early flight from Chicago to New York. The driver remained the same after all these years. but with a lot more gray in his hair. Arrival at the mansion was uneventful. When I arrived at 11 a.m., my mother was sitting in the greenhouse admiring the roses and gardenias while having a mimosa. My mother requested a mimosa, so the butler made one for me. While working for a living, I forgot about some of the lovely things that money could buy. She cooks and cleans everything herself. I felt more self-sufficient, yet I missed the lifestyle that my parents provided for me as a child. "Hello, Mom. It's nice to see you. And it's good to see you, Laura. But you did not come here to exchange pleasantries. So what is the real reason for your visit? It's just like old times." Mom got right to the point and knew something was up. There is no point in attempting to deceive her. I was curious as to how insane my plan was to persuade Bill to leave our marriage voluntarily so that I might pursue my own happiness more freely. If I admit that I have boy difficulties, will this make sense? Throughout my childhood, my mother and I would constantly speak in riddles. This seemed to be her typical style of communicating. Everything was obscured by another meaning, or several, depending on the circumstances. If I was obedient enough, she would assist me. She dismissed the butler so that we could be alone. Totally. Who did you meet, and what did you do? Nobody knew. Do you recall when I told you about a man in college who refused to talk to me? She nodded, so I continued. He returned to my life after all this time. And you're not confused. Do you still want him? Why? Money, power, sex. It must be one of the three. Actually, I think I'm perplexed. That is why I am here. His name is Warren Blaylock, and he's been messing up my life for the past 6 months. I fell silent. Laura, you are not confused. I hear it in your voice. You are conflicted, and you say you haven't had sex with him yet. If I am not mistaken? No, I did not have sex with him. I have an excellent sex life with Bill. It is not about sex. It's just that I believe I'll be happier with Warren than Bill in the long run. Why? You just mentioned that Bill suits you in bed. You already have Will. Alternatively, you may have unlimited funds. All that remains is power. Is Warren a powerful man? It was time to share the painful circumstances of Bill's meal a week earlier. Bill doesn't want children. Mom was silent for half a minute, but it seemed much longer. This information is only now coming to light. I assumed this issue was fixed prior to your involvement. Was I mistaken, or were you? I swiftly launched into my rebuttal of my mother's accusations that I had not checked the children's questions before picking a life mate. Absolutely not. Bill has completely reversed his position. In a more pleasant tone, the mother expressed regret. I'm sorry for pausing to think, sweetie, so how can I help you? I mentioned my half-baked intentions to my mother, as well as Warren's deadline. She nodded at the appropriate times, but didn't say much until I finished. I'm surprised. I didn't expect something so difficult or treacherous from you, Laura. Coming from mother's lips, this was excellent praise. Perhaps my strategy stood a possibility of success. Thank you, Mama. Do you think it'll work? Oh, God, no. There are probably 1,000 reasons why this will fail. Only 1 or 2 of these might work. But that's what makes it fun. She grinned with a twinkle in her eye. I suppose my mother knew. The game has started. So what would you do? So, I assume the first thing we need is more information about Bill, right? He appears to have popped out of nowhere at UCLA, which we both know is impossible. I agree. Should I hire a private investigator? No. I've been thinking about someone else. Leave it to me. I will make the call. You're leaving on Thursday, but I'll bet a martini. He will have everything we need before you depart. Why don't you bring yourself? Okay. While I call, we will have lunch. I spent the following 2 days chatting to my mother and fretting about the myriad of ways she predicted things would go wrong. She informed me that the proposal had a potential of success, but that males tend to think beyond the box. And she said it just like that. This surprised me even more. Someone might argue that I'm being cowardly by not simply informing Bill that not having children is a serious issue. Couples end their relationships for a variety of reasons. This was an issue with a binary solution. If he does not want children and I do, then we will not have them. So he won while I lost. There are no compromises. There is no middle ground for discussion. If I talked him into having children and we had them, he would definitely grow to despise me and the children in the long run. I don't want to take that chance. I suppose if I coaxed him into having children, he may grow to love them, but I didn't like those risks. My mother surprised me during lunch on Wednesday. She opted for a spacious gazebo by the pool for lunch today. When I arrived, a man was seated in the third seat. Mom introduced him as Henry Weinstein. She gave no further hints as to who he was or why he was at the meal. Let us all enjoy a lovely lunch. Laura, honey, I'm going to order a martini for lunch. She and I both understood what that meant. Mr. Weinstein must have acquired information about Bill's past and came here to present it personally. I'll come back once you finish your meal. I am confident you will have a lot to talk about with Mr. Weinstein. After lunch, Mom excused herself to clean up. This was Henry's cue to open his briefcase, which held a folder about 3 inches thick. I was shocked that so many records could be collected in 48 hours. This is yours, Laura. However, crucial information is summarized on the top 2 sheets. I'll let you read it and then respond to any questions. I believe the mother had already reviewed the summary and elected to depart. We will discuss the findings later. I read 2 printed sheets outlining Bill's. Boring childhood mother-father, sister became pregnant out of wedlock but never married. A few friends from school. Finally, I found the information I was seeking for. A girl was named Tracy Shield. Bill appeared to be on the verge of leaving high school for college. There was no way to tell how close they were, but the report stated that they spent a lot of time together the summer before he started at Boise State. She was a year younger than Bill, but later attended college and medical school to become a doctor. In reality, I'm a children's doctor. Are there any recent details about Tracy Shell? I asked Mr. Weinstein. He answered by taking the file from me and thumbing through it until he located the page he was looking for. He handed me the spreadsheet. It included her income, address, marital status, location of employment, and a variety of other information. One thing quickly struck my attention. Tracy is a pediatrician. She must have had a strong love for children. If Bill was her first love and she desired children, it just would not work. I continued to read the details. It turned out that she spent 2 summers in the Peace Corps in separate locations, but the second summer in Africa, she had to return home early due to illness. The report did not specify what she contracted. Then I pondered how it was possible to obtain so thorough information about someone so quickly. This worried me, so I decided not to ask Mr. Weinstein any further questions. Thanks. I guess I've got all I need. I called the butler to see Mr. Weinstein out and requested a martini when he returned, after he departed. The next phase in my strategy began to form in my mind. Mom reappeared almost quickly after Mr. Weinstein departed, smiling. Your face suggests that Mr. Weinstein was helpful. I was. I suppose I should phone the airline and ask if I can stop in Memphis before returning to Chicago. There's no necessity. I've already put you on a 5 o'clock flight to Memphis, followed by a ticket to Chicago tomorrow. It's all on my credit card, so if Bill ever gains access to your statements, he'll have no idea what happened. The mother's face lit up with a tiny devil smile once more. Now, what do you intend to ask Miss Shelley? I remember why you're constantly winning at cards, Mom. You had all the cards. She grinned again, presumably proud of herself. I know I want to ask her, but I doubt it will go well. I was thinking about it as well. The only conclusion I reached was to be absolutely honest with her. Call her and request to meet. She would like to meet the woman who married the love of her life at lunch tomorrow. Then tell me everything, exactly as you told me. You mean you want her to introduce herself to Bill and try to seduce him? Well, not in those terms, but you must offer it as a proposition so that she sees the value in it. But you have to play on her emotions, just as she probably feels about Bill. Do you feel for Warren? What could possibly be wrong with 2 ladies being happy with the man they desire? However, she must participate in the game. What if she does not want to play? People are motivated solely by money, power, or sex. You observed her income on the report, which is acceptable but not outstanding. This might be the way to go. She's probably not interested in power, though it's possible. That is the last thing I would try. We know she is unmarried, so if she dislikes women, which I doubt, she will have a great desire for sex with your husband. Mom, I can't believe what you said. Grow up. Laura, there are few 60-something ladies who would refuse to have sex with a 30-year-old man, especially someone as handsome as Bill. I find it quite beneficial to stretch my legs every now and again. I cannot believe we are having this topic. My mother wants my husband. Honey? My desire is one thing, I am merely half of the equation. Bill's desire is another matter. I doubt Bill wants your mother, as you phrased it. At least not the last time I asked. So you see, it takes two to tango, and that will not happen with Bill. My mother's disclosure that I had drained my martini in one gulp took me entirely by surprise. Mom appeared to be perfectly confident, as she always is. When she returned to say her goodbyes, I had already left to pack. Mom was seated in a lounge chair near the pool, drinking another martini and reading a book. I was still outraged at her words and her desire to sleep with my spouse. She knew it as well. Laura, consider the end product. I doubt it's as complicated as you imagine. Things are never as they appear until you begin peeling back the layers. I love you. Fly safely. I kissed her cheek and muttered goodbye. Tracy agreed to have lunch with me the next day. She was quite wary. She suggested we meet at a little restaurant near the hospital where she works. I got at the restaurant at 11:30. I needed time to cool down, find a table, and mentally prepare for my talk with Tracy. Tracy arrived punctually at lunchtime. The hostess sat across from me at a tiny table near the kitchen. It was the most secluded area the restaurant had to offer, which wasn't much. I introduced myself as Tracy. She offered me a hard handshake. She was still quite wary. "Listen, I think I understand why you're here," she began. It stunned me. What I was going to ask her for was beyond my wildest imagination, and she could have anticipated it herself. Then it occurred to me. My mother must have called Tracy. She realized how tough it would be for me to explain this dumb scheme. That is why she delivered her speech before I left. I tried to maintain a calm demeanor on my face while resentment for my mother's interference rose within me. "So, will you do it? You want to seduce your spouse with your permission so he would fall in love with me?" "Of course. I can't think of anything I'd like more. He was my first love." "But I believe you already know that. You astonished me." "Yes. All of this astonished me too. But I get why you want children. I understand you informed your mother that Bill did not want it. I apologize for it. For me, too. If, for some strange reason, Bill decides we can be together, I genuinely enjoy kids. Still waiting for the chance to be with him. I believe I am ready to sacrifice children." Tracy's candor, combined with her desire to be with my husband, astonished me even more. Bill was beautiful. Yes. Successful? Yes. "What amount did she offer you?" I inquired, thinking it couldn't be so straightforward. "You mean how much money did your mother offer?" "Yes. I figured she'd probably offer money to seal the deal. I just wasn't sure how much." "A lot." She urged me to set my price. After we talked and I recovered from my first shock, I informed her that if Bill was with me, I would be his forever, with or without the children. I never contemplated accepting the money. I'm not a woman of easy virtue. My virtue isn't for sale. We ordered and ate lunch. I studied each other carefully to figure out why Bill was attracted to her in the past. She is, I suppose, attempting to comprehend what Bill saw in me. We were two entirely different persons. She was a doctor, I was an attorney. We have nothing in common. There was a medical conference in Chicago in a few weeks, which would be an excellent time for Tracy to re-enter Bill's life. My duty was to find a means to get him there, or close to it. We exchanged mobile phone numbers on our way home after lunch. I started thinking about how Bill and I may stumble into Tracy in what appeared to be a random circumstance. I considered phoning my mother to express my anger at her for her sexual aspirations for my husband and the chat with Tracy. But she was already aware of my feelings. Furthermore, she had already planned the most difficult portion with Tracy as I stepped off the plane. I considered asking Bill to take me to dinner near Tracy's conference. Tracy could stop by after the conference, and the meeting would be entirely random. I'd have to take the risk that Bill would recognize Tracy after 10 years. Maybe I'd be in the bathroom or on a work call, as I occasionally did, and not be in the room when Tracy arrived. It could have worked. Then I'd have to trust that she could flirt with him sufficiently to pique his interest. It was fraught with issues, but it might have been the greatest idea. I called Tracy from the car on the way back to the apartment and informed her about my plans. She boldly stated that she could work with this rudimentary concept. We arranged to speak multiple times in the coming weeks to confirm times, locations, and any signals we needed to exchange. Tracy flew to Chicago the day her conference started. She checked into the hotel and called to say she was in her room. She had little interest in the conference and was basically on standby, waiting for me to call if plans changed. Bill was intending to take me to dinner at a new restaurant that had recently opened near the hotel where Tracy's conference was being held, something he was unaware of. So far, everything was going as planned. Then, at 5 p.m., Bill called the office to say he'd be late. The large case he was working on abruptly changed all of my hard work. The outcome of this unexpected rencontre was uncertain. I told Bill everything was fine, and I understood. We will have dinner later. He warned it might be too late. This made me furious. Damn you, Bill. Why can't we take a break from work to enjoy ourselves? If it isn't my partner's job, it's yours again. What I said was just partially correct. I was furious that my chance for a chance meeting had been squandered. Sorry, Laura. I will make it up to you, I promise. I became inspired. You should. You can take me to lunch tomorrow. I didn't want to push him too hard, but I also didn't want Tracy to lose her tight relationship with Bill. I called Tracy and explained the issue. We decided to reprise the performance at lunch the next day in the same restaurant. This time, everything went well. Bill picked me up at the workplace. I made a reservation for Thursday at 12 o'clock. Tracy was supposed to arrive 15 minutes later and meet us by coincidence. As far as I could tell, I had precisely planned my restroom excursion. Tracy arrived exactly at 12:45. I excused myself and went to the restroom. I had to rely on Bill's honesty to tell me when I returned or speak with Tracy later, hopefully both. I gave Tracy about 7 minutes. We decided on a specific time in advance. Any longer would have seemed excessive given my absence. Anything less would have given her insufficient time to work her charms. She had just left the restaurant when I returned. I hoped Bill had invited her to remain and eat lunch with us, but that's how things turned out. Tracy grinned and winked at me, indicating that she had met Bill again. I had a brief moment of remorse, anger, and bitterness. Shame for my deception, anger at Bill for receiving the attention so easily, and bitterness at Tracy for taking my spouse. Even with my permission, I continued to love him. I never anticipated the feelings that would arise. Bill noticed the pain in my face. Are you all right, Laura? You look awful. Don't you feel great? Keep the overall aim in mind. As my mother had advised, I pulled myself together and smiled. Yes, I received a call from the workplace while I was in the restroom. Sorry. Last night I mentioned more about us than about you. What do you mean? I mean either your or my career is interfering with our life. I'm just bored of it. Let's drink some wine with lunch. I don't have to return to work till later. Perhaps we can, I interrupted him. No, I need to return to the office. See? That is what I'm talking about. Yesterday it was your responsibility. Today mine is in the way. He nodded in understanding. We grabbed a brief lunch and talked a little. I noted that he did not mention meeting Tracy. Interesting. Perhaps she was deeper in his heart than I realized. Or perhaps Tracy was better than I realized. On the way back to the office, I contacted Tracy's cell phone. So how did things go? Better than we could have expected. We'll have lunch tomorrow before I depart. And thank you for giving me this chance with him. He is even amazing than I remembered. Are you certain about that? Yes, I'm certain, I replied. But without delight, I wasn't sure about anything. So, I've been trying to figure out why you want to give up on Bill, but I can't think of anything. You are either stupid or madly in love with the other person. I do not think you are foolish, so it's probably the latter. Either way, if it works, I win. Part of me was relieved that the strategy worked. The other part was upset with Bill for agreeing to have lunch with Tracy so readily. Her petite shape made her appear beautiful. I didn't believe she was as elegant as I thought, but Bill recognized something in her. I kept reminding myself of the final aim. This is what I wanted, right? I was useless at work, wondering what would happen during Bill and Tracy's lunch the following day. I departed around 4, claiming Marcia I had a headache. She nodded, indicating her comprehension. When I arrived home, I prepared myself a martini. I discovered that I enjoyed them again. After a couple martinis at my mother's house, I needed to play quietly at home. I had to play the innocent wife while my own husband was being seduced by the woman I had set up for him. If the jury had understood the truth, they would have pronounced me mad and sentenced me to a mental facility. When Bill returned home, I felt like I was examining his collar for lipstick stains and smelling to see if he had smelt anyone else's perfume. The second martini I drank certainly exacerbated my paranoia while Bill was changing. I undressed in the kitchen and then mixed 2 martinis. I carried 2 glasses into the bedroom as Bill was tucking his polo shirt into his shorts. He looked at me and then at the beverages. That is all it took. He ripped off his shorts and shirt. I gave him his drink, and we clinked glasses. It didn't take me long to finish my 3rd drink, although Bill finished his nearly immediately. We made love. It made me nostalgic for my time in law school. At that point, I knew how much I loved Bill. I adore him, whether or not we have children. I nearly convinced myself that I could live without children. Perhaps the alcohol spoke to me. Then the image of my mother flashed across my head, urging me to focus on the end objective. Can I have both the man I love and a great sex life while also having children? Warren could be the complete product, but I won't know unless I follow the plan. Can I truly give up 2 of the 3 for a shot with Warren in the latter, the highest reward? Can I live with myself doing this? Yes, I was dedicated to the course. I wasn't sure if Bill had succeeded in seducing Tracy, and I was expecting a bad mood the next evening, which never materialized. Instead, he was pleased. Damn, how could he be so joyful while I was so unhappy? Maybe Tracy was more charming than I expected. Perhaps she and Bill shared an intimate dinner in her hotel room. Perhaps they reignited their summer passion by eating lunch together naked in bed. I offered to make dinner, but Bill recommended that we get Chinese takeaway. It suited me, and they delivered. I instructed that he change his clothes. I created 2 martinis, and they quickly became my new favorite drink. I'm sure that surprised Bill, 2 evenings in a row, but I didn't care. We generally drank wine. I was waiting for him when he returned to the living room, and my drink was already half finished. Is everything well, Laura? You appear to be drinking more than normal. Martine is too. Was it the visit to your mother's that made you like them again? I am going to drink some wine. I suppose so. Chinese food will arrive shortly. Let me know about your day. I have already taken his untouched martini. This was not rare. We normally relaxed with a glass of wine, telling each other about our days. This was our nighttime routine. Bill was apprehensive at first, which didn't surprise me. He suddenly had to keep secrets. His life wasn't an open book anymore. He had to be careful about what information he revealed with me. It was almost comical to see him mentally test each assertion before sharing it with me. Perhaps Tracy was better at deploying her charms than I knew. The food arrived. We ate and talked about our day. I had no idea how Tracy's lunch went because she had to depart at 4, leaving me no opportunity to speak with her before she left. Bill didn't mention anything about Tracy at dinner, which didn't surprise me, but it enraged me that he fell into an affair so easily. I believe the bounds of his intellect were also moving. What did I do? I was shocked. It's nice to see Tracy. She'll be in Chicago. She strolled into the restaurant where my wife and I were having lunch while attending a medical conference. And what's even more astonishing is that my wife had just used the restroom. What were the odds? 1,000,000 to 1. I decided after going over my probability and statistics tasks in my brain. After I recovered from my first shock, Tracy made matters even more difficult by asking for lunch the next day. Today was her last day at the conference. She wanted to talk. I realized that the cosmos had taken a leap. The likelihood that this was a random meeting and that lunch tomorrow was not scheduled was simply too high. I decided to continue playing to see how deep this deception may go. I arranged to meet Tracy for lunch the next day at her hotel. Comfortable. One of the many questions I'd like to have answered is why. Why did Tracy decide to enter my life now? Has she been searching for me all these years? I had several questions for Tracy. My world started to drift away from the center. She departed before I could say anything. Laura was visibly inebriated when I arrived home that evening. I could smell gin on her breath as she kissed me. She offered to prepare a martini while I changed. I agreed. Less than 3 minutes passed. She brought out 2 martinis while wearing red high-heeled shoes, as if she were a cocktail waitress from a men's magazine. This was not our typical talk over a bottle of wine. This was different. I sensed waves of remorse between us. Mine. About Tracy. I felt unsure about her. After several hours of the finest sex I'd experienced in our entire relationship. The guilt nearly overcame me. Not because of the sex, but because I failed to mention Tracy. That was a lie. By default, I had no secrets to keep. Laura didn't either. Nothing transpired between Tracy and myself while Laura was using the restroom. If this were true, why did I feel guilty? We do not keep secrets from each other. At least nothing significant. Right. I couldn't take the distance between us. Over nothing. But I couldn't bring myself to tell her about Tracy or our lunch plans for tomorrow. What did this reveal about the state of our marriage, I wondered. The following day's lunch was almost funny. Almost. In truth, it's more of a sad tragicomedy. As it turned out, I just watched Tracy's anxiousness, not really understanding why she offered wine, possibly to calm herself, as soon as it arrived. We told each other about our life. She plans to attend medical school. Law school is for me. Marriage is for me. Her preferred dating style is casual. Everything is extremely casual, yet talk and drink helped soothe her nerves. My hand was on the stem of my wine glass after taking a sip when she unintentionally touched my fingers, creating an accent. It was a light touch, yet it produced a distinct image. She meant something other than memories. What did I mean? She was the lady I expected to spend the rest of my life with. Those old sentiments began to resurface. She was the person I would marry, have children with, and grow old with. We'd live in a large mansion wherever our careers took us. However, I fell in love with Laura in one of my previous dreams. Tracy has not altered significantly since the summer. We had fun. As she discussed her life as a doctor, I could see the determined woman she had evolved into becoming even more appealing. She had a sweet disposition after she calmed down. Her grin was as warm and real as I remembered. Then she abruptly switched the topic of conversation. My mother informed me that you called the first summer back from college. I nodded, surprised by her change in topic and tone. Tracy continued. I was a Peace Corps volunteer that summer, but you never phoned back. Why? It stunned me. Your mother made it clear that any attention to you was undesired. She said I wounded you when I left for college. I never wanted that, I said pleasantly. I know you didn't intend to, but you did it. I was devastated. I adored you then and still do. I never stopped. In fact, seeing you here today, after all this time, brings back all of these good memories. She said it so plainly, as if I should have known all along. The way she nonchalantly expressed her emotions set up even more alarm bells in me. I tried not to express emotion. I didn't have anything to say. Tracy continued. Can you imagine what it's like to be a couple? You, me, us? I imagined it. We had no idea what college would be like or how long we would be away if we stayed together. But every night, whether in South America or Africa, I hung on to the ideal of you and me together. It kept me alive. Why are you telling me this? I collected a small bill. I'm about to tell you some facts you don't know. It is going to hurt, and for all the pain I'll cause, I apologize. I am truly sorry. I may not be psychic, but yesterday's accidental meeting was a coincidence, correct? And today's lunch isn't only about old buddies reminiscing, correct? Tracy gave a humble, knowing smile. No, there is no doubt regarding any of the occurrences. Okay? So why are you here? Or did someone set everything up? Remember? I apologize. And I love you. Laura, your wife, set everything up. A chance encounter. My request for dinner is intended to lure you. I hope that you will fall in love with me as much as I do with you. Tracy paused, allowing me to process her comments before continuing. I didn't have anything to say. She, or more specifically her mother, contacted me around a month ago. Laura flew to Memphis the following day. We had lunch. When I chatted with her mother, she offered me money if I followed Laura's plan. That sounds like her mother. You know, she had the courage. Does not matter. It doesn't matter now. Please continue. I'm curious to see how far down this rabbit hole goes. I had plenty of time to consider her mother's offer and Laura's plan. I knew I'd never accept the money her mother offered. There was no decision to make. I may be deeply in love with you, but I am not a woman of easy virtue. But you agreed to Laura's proposal, at least somewhat. You're here, correct? I'm here. But it is the only aspect I agree with. Laura's plan did not include exposing your wife and mother-in-law. It was my initiative, and to see whether there is any remaining love that I know you felt for me. I know you felt it, but you never mentioned it. Tracy, I feel like I am in a spy movie, and you are a honey trap. She giggled at my comparison. I am flattered, but no. Seduction was part of Laura's goal. I just did it for selfish motives. I told Laura that I would agree if I got the opportunity to be with you. But I plan to tell you everything from the start. I admire your candor, and perhaps I should be flattered. I smiled at Tracy. Am I bewildered now? Tracy tilted her head. Give me a minute. I suppose she has someone. Or do you know? Yes, I don't know his name, but someone discovered her long-lost love. Or so she said. Similar to us, right? I highlighted the importance of reconnecting with one another. Found because it was at best a rig. Tracy appeared guilty. I suppose you can look at it that way. I do not know. It's all very cunning and dishonest. So her objective was for you to seduce me. Just enough for me to leave her, or for her to conveniently learn about the affair from you, allowing her to divorce me and be with her lover. It's almost as if she loves me enough to let me go lightly. It relieves her guilt. It's quite manipulative. She truly worded it that way, I guess. I was just happy to have another chance with you. I didn't really care about her motivations. I just cared about you, and I was planning to tell you anyhow. I would never betray you with a lie. May I ask you a question? Please be honest with me. Do you believe you could give me some time? Is it time to figure things out? That is a terrible way to discover that your wife does not love you and wishes to divorce you. Tracy smiled. If you think there's a chance, I'll wait as long as necessary to be with you. I love you, Bill. Always have. It's not a game on my end. I genuinely love you. I'm just irritated that I got duped. I'm angry too, but not with you. Give me some time. Remember the commitment you made when you left for school after our summer hobby? I recall saying I will come back for you in the future, so here I am. A smile flashed across her face. The timing may not be yours or mine, but the future is here. At the very least, it could benefit us. Is that what you intended, at that time? Yes. I answered honestly, and I believe you now know the solution to this question. Otherwise, you would not be here. Tracy's smile spread across her entire face, brushing her eyes, which relaxed as a tear rolled down her cheek. We never got around to ordering lunch. None of us had an appetite. We drank one bottle of wine. Tracy needed to take a taxi to the airport. I promised to call her. We parted ways with a brief kiss on the lips, which I accepted without any resistance. Given that my marriage was failing, dinner tonight will be interesting. I didn't want to give Laura the satisfaction of thinking I had something to hide. It might be wiser to go on the attack after the Chinese cuisine arrives, with some wine for me and a martini for Laura. We ate. We spoke about our day. Why didn't you admit that you never loved me? Do you love someone else? I expected more of you. I said it as factually as I could, almost in a whisper while we were finishing dinner. Until this moment, I had kept my tone neutral. Laura pretended to be astonished, as if she had no idea what I was talking about. What exactly are you talking about? Tracy told me everything during lunch. I challenged her. Who is Tracy? Please, Laura, do not insult my intelligence. Tracy told me everything about your negotiations in Memphis. When Tracy unexpectedly ran into me in the restaurant, I knew something was up, but you have to be with your lover. I was calm on the appearance, but furious on the inside. Yes, we probably should. Laura left it hanging in the air, enabling me to take it as I saw fit. She appeared defeated. You think you need what? I want to be with Warren. You do not know him. And no, we did not have sex. I could not do that to you. So you say you have enough respect not to have sex with your lover, which I don't believe. But you can't look me in the eyes and say it's all over. You have found someone else. Is this true? Basically, absolutely, I believe. But this is not true. Please, do not speak in riddles, Laura. Not now. This is not the time for conversations like the one you're having with your mother. Okay, fair enough. His name is Warren Blaylock. I met him in college 2 years before you. He did not want me then. He said he had other essential things to do, and now he is back for you. How long has he been back? It's been about 6 months since I acquired the partnership. Laura stated this, and I started shouting. You have been cheating for 6 months, bitch! Bill, stop! That is not true! Warren and I had only shared a few lunches and dinners. Nothing sexual occurred. I refused to get intimate with Warren until I interrupted her. So he's come back into your life and you want a divorce so you can be happy with someone you hardly know? Perhaps you have lost your sanity. I'm not sure what I want. Yes, perhaps that will happen. But I wanted you to be happy too. Do you know what Tracy was for? You devised an intricate plan to introduce Tracy and have her try to seduce me. She told me everything, Laura. Unlike you, she was honest. But you were dishonest with me before we got exclusive. You mentioned you wanted children. I just want to. Not right now. I paused to gather my thoughts. Okay, I get it. Warren wants children. Offense, suburban life, all that domestic idleness. Well, I understand he wants children, but you don't. She shouted it so harshly that it tore my heart. Children became a deciding factor. And why now? Bill, the clock is ticking. It is time, so that's it. You have already left the marriage, and when will you make your decision? When we have kids, who should I be with? The brazenness of her machinations was nearly beyond comprehension. Of course not. I understand that you may no longer believe I respect and love you, but I truly wanted to know if there was anything remained between you and Tracy. She claimed to have loved you back then. You never mentioned her, so it could have been a long shot. But I had to try. So what happens now? Laura, I suppose we might attempt couples therapy if you want to save your marriage. But are you sure you want to stay with me? Knowing the reality, I should have expected you to become your mother. No, I could never trust you. I'm not sure whether I even love you anymore, let alone love you. This will all turn out the way you wanted. No. Right. Are you going to be with Warren? The pampered young princess always gets her way. I never intended to hurt you. However, you and your mother devised this scheme so that I could cheat on you. How is that love? It may not appear to be love, but do you understand why I wanted you and Tracy to reconcile as a way to relieve your guilt or as grounds for divorce? Of course, I responded fast. Could you ever see it from my perspective? Is there a method to make you happy? I genuinely love you, Bill. Otherwise, I wouldn't tell all of these falsehoods to get you and Tracy together. It may appear dreadful, but all I wanted was for you to have someone, even a friend, to help you go on. You love me enough to part with me like an old pair of shoes to make room for new ones. I don't require that type of affection. Not from you. I apologize, Bill. I actually am. I know I hurt you and will feel bad about it for the rest of my life. But I want to see where life with Warren takes me, and I really want children. I hoped you'd feel the same way about Tracy, and maybe in time, but I see now that you don't. Well, I believe we're almost done. Allow the lawyers to figure things out. I am staying at the hotel tonight. I will pick up my belongings tomorrow. Go to Warren. Now you can sleep with him without feeling guilty. I considered calling my mother, but she would have responded, I told you so. I did not need to hear it. I considered calling Warren, but I did not have his number in Europe. I have never felt more alone in my life. Bill had just left, yet I was already missing him. I abandoned him for a chance with someone who had disregarded me when we initially met. How foolish could I be? Pain and remorse ate through me like cancer. Fortunately, there was only half of the gin remaining in the bottle. Otherwise, I would most likely have died from alcohol poisoning that evening. So I made this bed. I now need to sleep in it. I considered calling Bill just before I passed out on the couch. Fortunately, the phone was in the kitchen, but I was too inebriated to reach it. I wanted him back. I wanted everything the same as before, as if it were a Friday night with Chinese cuisine, wine, awful melodramas, and cuddling with my husband on the sofa. Instead, I had tears of loneliness and guilt, followed by more tears to perpetuate the cycle. I reserved a hotel near the office before returning home. I knew I wasn't going to stay in the apartment after our dinner conversation, knowing the conclusion, the betrayal, the sense of inadequacy, and all the other pointless emotions I had been experiencing throughout the day and evening threatened to overwhelm me as soon as I settled into my hotel room. I did not allow it. I did not do anything wrong. I wanted children at some point, but not now. The prospect of youngsters growing up to be as two-faced as Laura makes me sad, but it disgusts Laura. I am disgusted. My rage flashed at Laura, and then I thought of Tracy. I wasn't sure what to think about Tracy. She told me the truth. At least she was the one who broke the news of betrayal. Laura may have been doing me a favor by contacting Tracy to be the messenger of the problem with my marriage, even though that was not her original goal. I felt deceived by Laura, yet Tracy delivered her information with the same gentleness as a pledge to love me no matter what. Perhaps Tracy's role as messenger made me feel better. The message and outcome, while unanimous, were clear. Laura and I are over. Tracy and I are on hold until this is handled. Sitting in the hotel bar downstairs, I considered calling Tracy to let her know the struggle was over, but I didn't want to give her false hopes. I assumed Tracy and I would take up where we left off at the end of that summer so many years ago. She deserved more than revenge sex or a rebound relationship. Summer romance. I recalled the happy times we had together. She was an inexperienced high school student, while I was a freshman with big hopes. I remembered how stoic she was the weekend before I left for college. I genuinely did not want to hurt her. I meant those words. However, the dice were rolled months before I asked her to dance at the high school celebration. Our destinies were not meant to bring us together. Instead, our paths were meant to separate. At least at the moment. Is it time to reunite? Like two winding streams uniting into one enormous river? Time will answer this question. I put Laura out of my mind and delegated responsibility for the divorce to our firm's internal affairs expert. If Laura chose to manage her own divorce, it was her decision. I would never be my client, and I would have no regard for any lawyer who became one. She hired a lawyer, which was beneficial for both of us. Our lawyers just finished the paperwork. The prenuptial agreement ensured that the divorce was amicable. Irreconcilable disagreements encompassed a wide range of issues. That was a good enough explanation, I think. I'll chat to Laura again someday, but not soon. It was roughly a month since the divorce was finalized. I received an email from an address I didn't recognize until I read the headline, "Still waiting." I figured out who it was from after only one guess. I instantly grabbed up the phone and dialed the number. Tracy answered the first phone as if she had been expecting me. Looking back, I realized that it was true. She was waiting for me, as she had promised during lunch that fateful day. I have a flight to Memphis scheduled for next weekend. Tracy boosted my self-esteem while damaging my ego, which had recently eroded significantly. Once the catharsis of the divorce had worn off, it appeared that the 10-year separation meant nothing to either of us. In many respects, I felt like I had wasted those years with Laura. I graduated from law school, passed the bar test, and became a successful attorney. Tracy's pediatric practice flourished. I had never seen Tracy happier as the day I moved into her house. After traveling from Chicago to Memphis practically every weekend, Tracy never let my occasionally morose mood interfere with our budding connection. She was truly my first love, and I was hers, as she frequently reminded me. She made me feel passionately appreciated, like a valuable work of art, something she could never let go of, something I now see Laura never did. I felt the same way about Tracy. I've never returned to Chicago. 1 year later, once the divorce was finalized, I called Laura. I heard that she and Warren married soon after our divorce. I complimented her and invited her to my wedding to Tracy. I suppose she was surprised to hear me on the other end of the phone. Her raucous laughter at the announcement of our wedding dispelled the tension that the situation demanded. We talked for approximately 5 minutes before she announced that she would be giving birth to her first child in a month. Laura and I shared similar news. Tracy was expecting twins in 7 months. She appeared distant, but I never said I didn't want children. Laura, attend the wedding. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, write a comment below with your thoughts on what